खरीदेगा, इसलिए हमारा फॉर्मेट ऐसा है कि हम 10% ही बोलने देते हैं आपको। निवेदन करूंगा कि राजेश भाई की किताब खरीदें और पढ़ें, और जगजीत सिंह का जीवन आपको और ज़्यादा निकट से देखने को मिलेगा।
किया है हम सभी के लिए। एंड देयर इट इज, राजेश जी, जोरदार ताली होनी चाहिए राजेश जी के लिए। Is holding the mascot of the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival, the lesser florican, the picture of a highly endangered bird captured by Padma Shri भालू मोंडे जी, जिनका एग्जीबिशन भी साथ में डिस्प्ले पर है। और ज्ञान सिंह जी के लिए जोरदार तालियां होना चाहिए। बहुत ही अद्भुत तरीके से एक मॉडरेटर के रूप में इस डिस्कशन को उन्होंने आगे बढ़ाया। The next session is mainly for the technology geeks. The title is The Great Tech Game, and we are delighted to have Anirudh Suri ji in conversation with TK Arun ji. मैं चाहूंगा पास में प्लीज क्लियर कर दिया जाए, and please stay seated for the next session titled as The Great Tech Game. And yes, we have the two gentlemen here with us, Anirudh Suri ji and so we have the two gentlemen here for the next session. I would request them to please take their places on the dais. We are extremely delighted to have with us Anirudh Suri ji, and he is going to be in conversation with TK Arun ji. मैं चाहूँगा दोनों का तालियों से हम स्वागत करें please. Anirudh Suri ji is a venture capitalist, technology entrepreneur, policy advisor, and an author. He is currently the managing partner at India Internet Fund, a technology-focused venture capital fund based in India and the US. Previously, he has worked with the government of India in Delhi, McKinsey, and more. He is also the author of The Great Tech Game, which was published in 2022. He has written extensively on foreign policies, geopolitics, national security, technology, and entrepreneurship. And he has served as the director on the board of the Harvard Alumni Association. So we are extremely happy to have you with us. Please welcome him with a round of applause, everyone. As the discussant for the day, for this session, we are delighted to have Mr. TK Tarunji with us. He is a Delhi-based journalist and columnist. He writes extensively on a range of subjects overlapping with political economy. He has also been the resident editor of the Economic Times at Delhi. He has headed the Economic Bureau and looked after the editorial page of the paper in the past. He had been with the paper since 1994, except for a 2.5-year stint with the .com world till contractual disengagement at the end of 2021. It's a pleasure for us to have you at this dais, and we are really looking forward to hearing from both of you. जोरदार तालियों से हम उनका अभिनंदन करते हैं एंड निवेदन करते हैं कि कन्वर्सेशन शुरू की जाए प्लीज.
Thank you. We are going to discuss a book that is very unique in some respects. It seeks to combine technology with geopolitics. Thanks to the Ukraine war, a lot of people who would not otherwise be acquainted with the intricacies of geopolitics, right now take note and understand why India is now playing a very special role in the world in balancing the interests of the United States, its own interests, that of Ukraine, and playing a very delicate game vis-a-vis Russia, China, and the US. And the way technology can play a decisive role in how countries are able to mobilize their strategic strength and project strength has been demonstrated by the US decision to ban key technology exports to China. And this is impede China's ability to develop its ongoing progress into a superpower in artificial intelligence. At least it will not stop it, but it might actually impede. Now, Anirudh Suri has examined this extensively before these current developments, although he wrote it only in 2022, and he has a very clear view on what a country like India should do to play its part in the world, what it should do with technology. Before that, would you please outline your perspective on why technology becomes so important in today's world?
Thank you, Mr. Arun, and thank you to the organizers, obviously, of the Bhopal Literary Festival, and Raghav Chandra ji, who has kindly invited me to be here. It's a pleasure to be here. Mr. Arun, your question around India's piece I'll come to, but as you've requested, I'll briefly outline why I feel that technology's implications for our world are important for us to understand. The first section of my book actually places what's happening today in terms of how technology is shaping the geopolitics of our world and the economic destinies of nations. I've tried to place the phenomenon that we all currently living through in a longer historical context, so that we can understand the gravity of what is happening today. One of the first few examples I start off in the book with is how when the Gutenberg press came about in Europe, almost 500, 600 years ago, people who were living at that time could not quite grasp at that time what the societal, economic, geopolitical, religious implications of that one technology or the printing press would have been. And I use that example to say that today, the kind of ramifications that technology is having are often equal, if not greater magnitude. And I place today's era, I call it the great tech game, but I've also spoken about some of the earlier games, great games that have happened in human history. So I talk about the advent of agriculture, for example, as a great game. People at that time, civilizations or river-based civilizations that time, that understood how to basically master agricultural technology at the time, which revolved, let's say, around irrigation technology, became richer, more prosperous regions and were the winners economically of that time. Similarly, you can go into more recent history and look at industrialization, the great industrialization game, or what I call the great colonization game, where countries that mastered that game ended up being the winners of that era. India, unfortunately, has missed many of these recent great games. We have not been winners in these great games. Going back to agriculture, yes, maybe we were, but not necessarily in the more recent great games. And I argue that unless we understand that today we are in a similar kind of historically transformative era, where technology is shaping the economic destiny of nations, it's shaping the geopolitics of our world, the world order, the ranking of nations, the relations between nations, and at the same time it's transforming society, much like industrialization did, as we moved from artisanal, village-based societies to more urban agglomerations and industrial towns, and that changed our values, our family values, the structure of our families, etc. In this similar vein is what's going on today. Our societies are also changing, not just the geopolitics of our world. Our family values are changing. I think many of you who have children will know that children are now more hooked onto technology than any relatives of theirs that might be visiting. And families are, as a result, the values are also changing. So that's really what I've tried to outline in the book. One, I have said that it's very important for all of us in India to understand this, because often, unfortunately, because of colonialism or other such global developments, we have become very obsessed with what's happening in India and sometimes fail to place what's happening in India in the larger global context. And so that's why I've tried to provide a global context for how technology is shaping our world, not just India. And then I move deeper into what India can do in order to do well in this great tech game, and what we as individuals can do as well.
There are certain aspects of our recent history that we don't really give great credit for or take into account properly. India is a poor little backward country in many ways. But in terms of the ability to absorb technology and utilize it for national progress, India is actually at the cutting edge in various ways. India had a nuclear program when very few countries had a nuclear program. India initiated a space program when very few countries could dream of having a space program. India set up IITs to train a pool of talent of the highest quality who would be able to build the technological infrastructure nation building required at the time. All this has come into fruition to make India what it is today, more ready than most countries of the world to take the next step in technology. Another thing that we fail to appreciate is the 2008 Indo-US nuclear deal. Having conducted nuclear tests in the past in 1974 and in 1998, India had been put under severe sanctions by the rich countries of the world. These sanctions meant that India was placed in a technology denial regime. India could not access sensitive technologies that had implications for missiles, various chemicals that could be potentially used for chemical warfare, other dual-use technologies, and as well as nuclear technologies. By signing that India-US nuclear deal, India obtained release from the technology denial regime. And this is something very few in the country at large appreciated, very few in the political class appreciated. Those who rule this country today vehemently oppose the Indo-US nuclear deal in 2008. They even tried to bring the government down. It is a credit to that then Prime Minister, who otherwise did not show much courage or conviction on many things, stood his ground and got his government to support him in defending the deal and then defending the government or obtaining a majority. So these two played a very crucial role in allowing India to be a member of different technology arrangements in the world, such as the Wassenaar arrangement, the Missile Technology Control Regime, the Australia Group, which now makes India in a position to access the finest in technology. But still, that doesn't mean that we are anywhere near where other countries are. In quantum computing and quantum communications, China is perhaps almost ahead of the US. In artificial intelligence, China is just only next to the US. In terms of quantity, perhaps they are ahead. India has the capacity to match any country in all these areas. But are we ready to do this? And how crucial is it that India should do this?
So I think how crucial it is, I don't think we can overemphasize that. I think it's absolutely critical that we win. And when I say we win, I mean be in the top 2-3 tech nations of the world. It's absolutely critical. We don't want 100 years from now, generations that come after us, look back at history, at this point in history, and say that the people who were the entrepreneurs of this country, the political leaders of this country, the bureaucrats and the civil servants of this, the business leaders, that they didn't understand what was going on. Right? It's absolutely critical. Sometimes, as a young teenager, even as a college student, I used to look back at the colonial era history and often wonder why India was not able to resist the empires of the West, right? And what I want to make sure in some ways by writing this book is that 100 years from now, those generations don't look back today and say, these guys again didn't get it, right? And they didn't play the right game. So it's absolutely critical because this will determine the economic destiny of our country, much like colonialization and industrialization did. What India should do, I think as you rightly pointed out, we have some of the foundation in place. We have great centers of teaching and technology excellence, the IITs of the world. We have a great talent base today in the country who's equipped to be leaders in the technology world, both from the top. You can talk about the Sundar Pichais and the Satya Nadellas of the world, but even the middle layer, and I would say also the bottom layer in this whole technology talent hierarchy in a way. Today we are fortunate that the capital constraints that Indian entrepreneurs or Indian businesses maybe used to face 20, 30 years ago, until 20, 30 years ago, that capital constraint has also now been removed to a large extent. Now foreign capital is flowing, domestic capital is being unlocked to support entrepreneurship and especially technology entrepreneurship. So we have some of these pieces there for sure. The other piece that you rightly mentioned is that today geopolitically, India is in a very advantageous position, which it might not have been during the Cold War era. It definitely was not when we were colonial subjects. Today, however, we are a nation that's on the up and rise. We have several countries of Europe, obviously the Americas, that want India to be a crucial partner with them. So I think these are some of the pieces that I would say are working well. Talent, capital, and I would say global partnerships. Where I think we are still lacking. And I will focus more on this because I don't want us to pat ourselves on the back too much before we actually get somewhere. Right? We only have the foundation today. We are not actually in the top 2, 3 nations, tech nations of the world today. We are not. No matter how many unicorns we might have in this country, the startup ecosystem, I always like to highlight that ultimately what matters is how much wealth is being created by companies. And if you total up the profits of 100 plus unicorns in India, they will not total up in aggregate to even the profits of one big tech firm in the US or China. Right? So we have to keep in mind that there's a long way to go still. And I think what the two pieces that we are still lacking are, one is ownership of technology. So I think as you alluded to, whether we talked about the nuclear agreement or others, India has been denied technology and India has also not been at the cutting edge of developing technology. We have often been adopters of technology that has been built in the West, typically in more recent times. And I think that's something that is still lacking to a large extent. We are not doing enough R&D in this country. Research and development spend in India today is 0.6 to 0.7% of our GDP spend. You compare that to a country like Taiwan or a country like Korea, these countries are great examples of countries that were poor 50, 60 years ago, but today are at the cutting edge of technology. Taiwan, obviously, as many of us know now, is one of the leaders in the semiconductor industry, which is at the core of today's tech wars also. How did they do that? How did these countries do that? One of the key ways they did that was they invested heavy amounts into R&D. India today, the 0.6% of our GDP that gets spent in R&D is largely in the pharma sector and to some extent in the auto sector. Pretty much minimal amounts in the tech sector, minimal amounts in the biotech sector, minimal amounts in quantum, artificial intelligence and so forth. And I think that's one thing that really needs to change. The second thing that I believe we are missing is a strategy. It's very important for us to be clear that this great tech game that I have described in the book is a global game. And much like corporates have to have a strategy to find their own niche in any kind of value chain, India, like any other country in this great tech game, has to know what its strategy in this great tech game is. What is our space or place in this ecosystem going to be? Are we going to remain a services-led IT services player and a talent nation that provides talent to the foreign companies of the world? Or do we want to go one step further and become a critical part of the tech ecosystem where we are developing technology that then other companies are taking from us, buying from us, etc. Right? Can we build the next operating systems of the world? So if Google today makes a lot of money by virtue of developing the search engine that everyone then leverages, or the Android operating system that then multiple apps get built off, can UPI, Aadhaar, our digital public infrastructure be seen as a digital operating system for the world, on top of which various apps could be built? Right? So I think it's things like this that need to form the core of the Indian strategy. And that combined with some of the other pieces that I mentioned, capital, talent, technology, R&D, I think that can then be the formula for India to win.
Yeah. You say in your book this, that the use of digital public infrastructure in India is something that is ahead of the world, rest of the world.
Yes.
Our CoWIN app for vaccination, this is better than what anybody has had anywhere else in the country. We developed something called India Stack. When you say C, that's a very expansive term. Based on Aadhaar, led by Nandan Nilekani, a set of people developed a clutch of application programming interfaces, which could be used to leverage Aadhaar to do a whole lot of other things, including our DigiLocker, including your M-Parivahan, and a variety of government services that state governments are competing to innovate to provide to the citizens. And this is something in which India leads the world. We have something called the account aggregator. I don't know if any of you know about this. If you don't, you should please find out. The financial activity of an entity, a small company, say example, how much money it borrows from whom, how much money it repays, pays as interest and pays back as principal, how much sales it has, how much raw material purchases it has, how much input tax credit it claims, how much GST it pays. All this data can be compiled instantly with the permission of the company at one place, that is operating the consent layer of the company, and presented to a would-be lender to give him a financial picture of this company far more current, far more credible than the annual report of the company that is 13 months back. This capacity India has, which today, if the government has a will, can be used to do concurrent audits to ensure these bank frauds that we are so familiar with never takes place. It requires a systemic integrity and leadership to operationalize this consent layer into concurrent audit. It is possible. So India has many things which are good for it, which can take it forward. At the same time, as you said, let's not pat ourselves on the back. There are many things which are a problem for us. Culturally, we are used to the idea that knowledge is finite. We are actually anti-progress, anti-science. I come from Kerala. A far more illustrious predecessor from Kerala is Shankara, who spread Advaita around the country. Shankara was given the title Sarvajna, he who knew everything. But this was our concept, that knowledge is finite, that it is possible for one individual to gather all the knowledge of the world and possess it. This is a cultural obstacle which chains us from preventing us from innovating. Today we know knowledge keeps on expanding. Every child in the United States is told to do something new, to find something new. The classrooms encourage inquiry, encourage questioning authority, whereas we do just the opposite. If a student asks too many questions, the teacher will say, shut up, you are disrupting the class. We need to have a cultural change in the way you view knowledge. Knowledge is infinite, it keeps expanding, and you have to spend money to advance that knowledge. As he said, we spend barely 0.7% of GDP on R&D. Korea spends 4%, 5%. A company like Huawei spends 20% of its revenues on R&D. And in India, there is no company which spends more than 2% of its revenue on R&D. This cannot take us forward. We need to spend more money on R&D, and we need to innovate in fundamental sciences, which also the point you make in.
Correct.
That you must do fundamental research. Only then you'll be able to do applications and
Applied
technology.
research. In fact, just yesterday in Delhi, one of the reasons I wasn't able to come yesterday here, I was at a summit where Mr. N. Chandrasekharan was speaking, who's the chairman of Tata, of the Tata Group. And I posed to him exactly this question. I said, why is it that despite being a large conglomerate with a big balance sheet, why is the Tata Group not spending more on R&D? I can understand if a cash-strapped SME in India or even a mid-cap company in India is not spending on that. But as one of the global conglomerates out of India, why is the Tata Group not spending more on R&D? And he acknowledged that it has been one of their big mistakes in the last 2 decades. And he said just in his last summit in December with all of their Tata Group CEOs, he said that greater R&D spend has to be in the top 3 priorities of the Tata Group across companies. And so I pushed him further and I said, why has it not been historically? And his view was that unfortunately the mindset has been, and this maybe goes back to the cultural issue you were describing, sometimes it's just a cultural or a belief mindset that Indian private sector companies have never believed R&D to be a way of getting more profits. They see it as an expense item. Whereas if you look at Taiwanese companies, Korean companies, examples like Huawei from China, or you look at obviously the US companies, which are often at the vanguard of R&D, they spend 10 to 15% of their revenues on R&D. Their cultural mindset is that unless we do R&D, we will not have actually any moat around our business. And if we don't have any moat around our business, we will not have any profits. And I think that cultural mindset must change. And it has to happen in the Indian private sector, the government unfortunately. And I tried digging there also, whether the government should be driving this, because often if you look at the examples of Taiwan, Korea, countries like that, it's cited that it was the governments of these countries that made the big push. You'll often hear the example of DARPA being cited in the US, saying that it was actually the defense departments of the US government that spent big money, but that's actually not right. While those examples are often cited, it has been the private sector that has led 70% of that, 80% of that spend, and today in the US, it's probably 90%, right? And I think that if we can change in India, I think that really will be a game changer for Indian technology and Indian companies across sectors, whether in pharma, biotech, agriculture, fertilizer, you take any industry, I think. If we have companies that start doing more R&D, 3 to 5 to 7% of their revenues into R&D, and we have great talent again, who can do the research.
Yeah.
We have the labs also. We have partnership with today access to labs globally that we can get access to because of our geopolitical position today, favorable one. So I think it's actually ours for the taking, but this mindset change has to happen.
Yeah. So plus the colonial experience played a role in this. When the British set up universities in India, these universities were meant to teach. They were not meant to produce knowledge. Whereas universities in Europe, in Britain itself, they are primarily knowledge producing entities. Their primacy is given to research. When the government spends money on R&D in the US, it's not just in defense and applied fields. It is basically in the universities, the grants they give to the universities. The touchscreen that we always associate with telecom companies, innovators like Apple, it was developed in a US university. Only the final adaptation to a phone was done by Apple. So unless we spend money in universities and convert them into hubs of innovation, new thought, new research, and new ideas, you will not take this country forward. And See, we have the Indian Space Research Organization, where people are paid a fraction of what these people would earn were they be to work in the private sector, still staying put in their nose to the grind and developing successfully whatever they want to develop. We have an atomic research program which somehow is badly underfunded, and the thorium-based fast breeder reactors that India is in a position to use to lead the world in fast breeder based nuclear reactors is being underfunded. So the government needs to fund more, basically, and on that the private sector will come forward to supplement. And this is what has happened in Korea, this is what happened in Japan, this is what's happening in China. And as he said, unless we do this, we face an existential threat. It's not just a question of losing economic competitiveness. We will be subjugated by hostile powers. We'll be under their thumb. And this is not something India wants. India has tried to maintain its strategic autonomy right after independence. And this is something we cannot forfeit. And as you said, we must build on our strengths, but we must build more. You mentioned, apart from digital technologies, biotech. Would you like to think more on what are the challenges there?
Yes. So many of us have heard of Digital India, Startup India, Digital India, etc. And I'll just come to the biotech piece, but I'll mention one point to contextualize why biotech is also important. So I think, as you might have gathered from some of the things I've mentioned, I believe that one of the mistakes India has made is that with each successive tech wave that has come in the world, we have been a bit too late to catch it. Sometimes we are late by 5-10 years. Sometimes we've been late by 30 years. If you look at semiconductors, for example, today you'll see the topic of semiconductors on every front page of every newspaper, every magazine, etc. India has launched a semiconductor mission today. In the 80s, India started on a semiconductor program, right? Some of you might know, in Mohali. Unfortunately, it didn't quite go where it could have or should have that time. And 30 years later now, 40 years later, we are now trying to catch up on semiconductors. Now, when it comes to biotech, why we didn't actually build on it, there are several reasons once you talk to people who were involved in it at that time. But the reason I bring that up is that it's very important for us to not just focus on waves that we can see right now in front of us, tech waves. The consumer internet tech wave, for example, we've been seeing, but the basis of that consumer tech wave was laid 20, 25 years ago. Today, we start focusing, like sometimes Europe is and sometimes India has almost thought about doing, of building our own Facebooks, our own Twitters. We are again trying to catch the tail of a wave. Whereas we need to be leaders in a wave. And that's why it's important to think about technologies that are not the mainstream today. So biotech, to your question, is actually one of those sectors or one of those waves of technology where massive exponential developments are happening. How many people in this room have heard of CRISPR? CRISPR. Genetic engineering technology. So maybe like I think 10-15% of the room. 100% of this room should have known about CRISPR by now. Really. You know, 100% of you know about Facebook and Twitter, but that's an old game now. Right? Today, CRISPR basically refers to genetic engineering technology that's allowing researchers to genetically edit parts of the human genome. Now, there are ethical issues also that are being tackled on this front, right? But the top researcher Nobel Prize was given, I believe, in 2020 to Jennifer Doudna. I believe she's at Stanford, I believe. Now, this CRISPR technology, we tend to think, okay, maybe it's genetically editing babies. And we'll immediately shut off saying, no, that's something we don't want to do. But actually, some of the greater applications of genetic editing are happening in agriculture. China, again, is one of the leaders in biotech. Unfortunately, we talk about China only in the context of India-China border wars. But we don't talk about what that country has been doing well. they've understood, and we must learn from this. They've understood when a new wave is developing, and then they put R&D dollars behind it. They put best research scientists, often brought from abroad as well as domestically, to do great research. Now on CRISPR and related technologies today, the Chinese have more patents than the Americans, even though the technology was developed in the US. Now, I mention all of this because in India, there is no startups basis this. There is only, I think, one department in Delhi, BIRAC, under the Department of Science and Technology, that's doing good work in this, but other than that, it's nowhere to be found. And the applications of biotechnology and genetic technologies are going to be immense when it comes to life sciences, healthcare, agriculture, the resistance of agriculture to various diseases, etc. Unfortunately, in India, we don't even allow research on these fronts. Yeah. We have banned research in genetic editing. Yeah. So when you have banned research, how do you ever expect to come up with good applications of the technology? Yeah. Right? So I think biotech I mentioned in the latter part of my book as part of my argument that we must look at the waves that are coming in the future, and 10 years before that wave becomes mainstream, we must have a lot of scientists working on it, institutions working on it, startups working on it, universities working on it, government putting in enabling policy, and so on and so forth, so that 10 years from now, we are actually a leader in that wave and not trying to catch the wave.
Yeah. And technologies reinforce each other.
That's right. That's
so
right.
Recently, last July, we had this report about a Google subsidiary in London called DeepMind. They released for public consumption a database of 320 million protein shapes. DeepMind is an artificial intelligence powerhouse. So it is a success in artificial intelligence which allowed this company to forecast the shapes of proteins. Everything, the virus has a protein. Most of our hormones are proteins. Our body proteins are, of course, proteins. Amino acids are proteins. These proteins are not just, they don't just have chemical compositions. The molecules have shapes. The way a protein folds is very key to understanding how it will actually operate in the real world. And predicting the shape of a protein has been extremely complicated. It could not be predicted because you basically had to experimentally analyze this using crystallography. Now this DeepMind has forecast the shapes of 320 million proteins. It is available as a searchable database for biotechnology companies around the world to decipher and find uses for them. And there is a great opportunity that is awaiting biotechnology around the world, including in India. And this is an example of how one technology helps propel another technology forward. Absolutely. And you also mentioned climate change, climate tech in your book. Will you please say on that?
Yeah, so climate tech is similarly, I think in the same lines as biotech, is actually a great example of what you also just mentioned, Mr. Arun, which is how technologies build upon each other. So climate technology today is a broad umbrella term being used to cover any kind of technologies that are helping address the issues of climate change or climate related emissions, right? As many of you will have now seen that this topic is becoming mainstream. We are realizing that climate crisis is not a thing of the future, but we are very much now living through the impact of it day in, day out in India and in other countries. Now what's happening is, interestingly, you would have heard of obviously solar panels and the solar revolution, as it's being called even in India. We are now one of the large solar developer countries. We have a large chunk of our energy coming from solar plants. But what we fail to appreciate is that 2 points I'll make there. One is, most of these solar plants, many of you will know, are actually not being made in India, are being made in our neighbor up north. So for the last 2 years, 3 years, since we've been in this geopolitical battle with them, we have not imported solar panels from China. As a result, our rooftop solar program, which is a big part of India's own plans for solar adoption, has been literally suffering. And it's going to take at least another 2-3 years before we can develop some kind of indigenous capabilities in it, so that we can actually now push our rooftop solar program as well. Now, why do I mention this? Because solar technologies or solar panels, solar PVs are part of a broader range of climate technologies that are becoming as crucial or as critical for countries as oil has been. Because the energy of the future now might not be oil, it will be technologies like solar, possibly green hydrogen, nuclear as you mentioned, and so on and so forth. And unless we realize that in 10 years from now, this shift will be so fast, 10 years later, we might realize that we are dependent on a whole range of technologies that are coming from countries that are not necessarily our friends. Many of the ingredients or the raw materials being used in solar panels, for example, or EV batteries, what are called rare earth materials, China happens to be the largest reserve holder of these rare earth materials. They're going into semiconductors, they're going into your EV batteries, your solar panels, and so on and so forth. So unless you think strategically about a whole range of climate technologies around carbon capture, carbon sequestration, you think about smart grid technology, because now your grids also have to change. Unfortunately, in India today, we are living under electricity grid system that can only be categorized as 1G, if I was to use the telecom analog. Whereas the world is moving to 4G and 5G. Our grid and the quality of the power grid is 1G. It's today only equipped to take power being generated centrally and being thrown out everywhere. But now with solar coming in and everyone becoming a possible producer themselves, if you have rooftop panels on your roof, for example, you need a decentralized grid where everyone is providing power into the system as well and taking. This kind of decentralized smart grids, which 5G technology is, by the way, helping build, is nowhere on the horizon in India. So what we'll realize is 10 years later, we are buying this technology from either Chinese companies or American or European. And then we'll worry about the security of our power grid because it'll all be European companies or Americans, right? So climate technology is yet another example where I believe India must look ahead and beyond just solar panels and EV. That's been the focus of the conversation so far. There's a whole range of other technologies under this umbrella that today our planners, both in the private sector and public sector, must be thinking about and preparing for. So all of these are examples of waves that we need to be catching early, not late.
But again, it's not just technology. It's how we use technology, how we view technology. And climate technology is a good example. The 6th assessment report of the UN panel on climate change, it had this striking number. The carbon budget available to prevent the world temperature rising 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels is only 500 gigatons. 500 gigatons is the carbon that will be spewed by 10 years growth. There is no way reducing emissions will contain additional carbon generated to 500 gigatons. The only way this disaster can be prevented is by sucking carbon dioxide out of the air. The reason why this is not commonly discussed is that this will put the onus on the rich countries which had put that carbon in the atmosphere in the first place. It is for us, countries like India, to be strategic about the solution and the technology. This is why carbon dioxide removal is the most crucial technology in climate right now. You said carbon sequestration and usage. There are certain universities in the US which actually have managed to at Canada to capture carbon dioxide from the air and convert it into carbon fiber and ammonia. This is being done through chemistry and biotechnology. Lawrence Livermore lab in the US, it actually produced alcohol and carbon. It is possible to, with carbon dioxide capture from the atmosphere. This is again being done by biotech. And this is cutting edge technology which Indians should be mastering. We should be funding startups in these kind of areas and not just going after unicorns. I'm happy that you wrote this in your book, that our showering attention on unicorns at the expense of more deserving companies elsewhere in the sector is doing great damage to our entire development ecosystem.
Yeah, and I'll add one more point, and I know I think we'll have to be mindful of the time also, but I'll add one other thing. All the conversation on technology, and towards the end of the book, I do say this. I think ultimately, I don't believe that technology is the solution for everything also. Right? Much like behavioral change is equally important, cultural values change or emphasis on better values is as important. There's another piece which I've been thinking a lot more about, which is that I think when it comes to some of these climate-related technologies, for example, cooling is a big energy consumption area, right? And as India becomes hotter and hotter, our cooling requirements are going up as we have more and more buildings that's going up. But we have to sometimes turn back to our traditional wisdom that is deep in our country, everywhere you go, for coming up with better systems of cooling, for example. We don't have to always follow where Western technology has gone in terms of cooling. We actually have had a lot of examples in our villages, our smaller sort of towns of building materials and building methods that have inherently been made sure that the houses were cooler, right? And I think if we have more startups that leverage some of that traditional wisdom, combine it with technology, I think then that again can be a very good formula for Indian startups to offer technology that an American startup or a European startup is not well placed to develop.
Sir, with your permission, I would like to open the floor for the audiences to ask any questions if they want. We have hardly 5 minutes to spare with us, so just 1 or 2 questions. Okay. It's on, sir.
एक दो पॉइंट जो आपने उठाए हैं टेक्नोलॉजी। मैं प्रभात तिवारी हूँ, यहाँ पर मैं डायरेक्टर हूँ।
Monde, Kala, photography.
आप आज के दिन में देखेंगे अगर बैंगलोर में काफ़ी लैब्स में डिज़ाइनर्स बैठे हैं, टेक्नोलॉजी वाले डिज़ाइनर्स, लेकिन वो डिज़ाइन कर रहे हैं क्वालकॉम के लिए। उसका आईपी जो बन रहा है उस डिज़ाइन के बेसिस पे वो क्वालकॉम के नाम पे जा रहा है पैटेंट। तो हमें ये चेंज करना है कि अपनी इंडियन कंपनीज अपना टेक्नोलॉजी डिज़ाइन करके इंडिया में आईपी सिस्टम बेटर करके यहाँ पे रजिस्टर करें। आई थिंक वो बड़ा इंपॉर्टेंट।
ओके, थैंक यू। नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन प्लीज।
सर
प्लीज नॉट अ डिस्कशन। मैं चाहूँगा 1 by 1 सब सवाल पूछें।
My name is Nilab. My question, this idea about geopolitical leadership through technology is a common one. But now we are kind of back to this idea of not so much globalization and perhaps the whole reverse of it. So how does this play out? What's your view on that?
That's absolutely right. I think
Because
that
historically context, I get it, but
correct. No,
looking forward.
The fear today is that the world might actually de-globalize in a way, especially from the standpoint of the US, which is trying to think very heavily about what they call reshoring. But I think that it's up to the other countries who are friends of the US today to talk less about reshoring in the US and friendshoring. So to the extent that the geopolitical battle between the US and China has caused them to think about decoupling from China, it should not mean that they should decouple with the rest of the world. It's equally important for them to say कि आज हम सारा कुछ खुद नहीं करना शुरू करेंगे, हम चाइना की जगह अपने और जो दोस्त हैं हमारे, चाहे वो इंडिया हुआ, ताइवान हुआ, कोरिया हुआ, यूके हुआ, जहाँ भी हुआ, I think to the extent that the US thinks of friend shoring, जो term उन्होंने use करी है, instead of reshoring, जो कह रहा है कि सब कुछ हम वापस ले आएंगे, अगर वो हुआ, friend shoring हुआ, तो I think globalization will continue. But yes, there's a real risk कि protectionism and nationalism in economic strategies could lead to a world where India does not have the ability to benefit from globalized trade, etc. तो वो risk real है.
Last question. I am Shailendra Tiwari. I am retired general manager from BHEL and basically a power engineer. At this point of time when energy transition is going on and hydrogen and the nuclear, they are at the center of it, and we are very well placed on the nuclear technologies. If we go for an SMR hydrogen and we can get into the energy transition and pack this energy into the hydrogen molecule and export it, I think we are able to win this race.
Absolutely, sir. SMR I think is definitely a part of that solution, for sure.
So just one last question. The elderly gentleman has been waiting since long.
JP Sharma, retired force officer. In Maharashtra, a farmer raised teak plants by procuring from a company raised genetically. A few teak plants became climbers. So there may be such fear in human babies also. What will happen then? How we can accept the genetically modified babies?
So देखिए, every technology has an element that you have to be afraid of. Going back to cars, गाड़ियाँ भी मारते हैं लोगों को, न्यूक्लियर प्लांट भी मारते हैं लोगों को, हम भोपाल में बैठे हैं, right? There have been industrial disasters also. So I think that the negative applications or the application of technology that we don't want, we must manage and control for that, but we must not say कि हम बाकी जो positive applications हो सकते हैं उसके उसमें हम research ही नहीं करेंगे. Just because a Western company does what it does with its seed vis-a-vis our farmers doesn't mean that tomorrow there's not a different model of doing genetic research that allows the farmer to still be in charge of propagating that seed on his own next time, ताकि वो perennially dependent नहीं हो रहा किसी large conglomerate पे. तो I just believe कि आप research करिए, वो जो alternative business models आपको करने हैं वो आप evolve करिए, but just because there's some negative implication of some technology, ये मत कहिए कि हम तो करेंगे ही नहीं, क्योंकि होगा फिर यही. जब हमने colonial era में भी देखी है, there was a time when land-based empires in India said, हमने तो global oceanic trade करना ही नहीं है, और देखिए उसका implication क्या हुआ. 300 साल तक हमने गुलामी करी. So we just have to be open to the positive applications, not block technology.
And if we didn't have genetic change, there would be no humans. We will still be monkeys.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Anirudh ji, and thank you so much, T.N. Arun ji. जोरदार तालियां होनी चाहिए उनके लिए. मैं मेहता जी को बुलाना चाहूँगा on behalf of the Society for Culture and Environment कि वो आगे आए और हमारे author और हमारे discussion को memento के साथ सम्मानित करें. This memento is the mascot of the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival, dear ladies and gentlemen. There it is. So मैं हमारे author और discussion का भी ध्यान केंद्रित करना चाहूँगा that this picture is the picture of a highly endangered bird called lesser florican, which is captured by Padma Shri Bhalu Mondi ji, and yes, Anirudh ji ke liye memento, and then followed by Mr. T.K. Arun ji for moderating this session in such a wonderful way, and of course, it was and indeed a technical journey for all of us, presented to us by Anirudh Suri ji. I would request Anirudh ji to please stay to the dais because he is going to be playing the role of a discussant now on the other side of the table for the next session, which is going to be a partially virtual session titled as Society 5.0 Ushering a New Renaissance, and will be getting connected to Ganesh Natarajan ji, a technical guru, and he will be in conversation virtually with Anirudh Suri ji and Raghav Chandra ji. Yes. Yes, they are going. Yeah, we are going to begin with the session. I think we are going to connect with Ganesh Natarajan ji. Let me just again tell you about the title, Ushering a New Renaissance. I think in French it translates to a new birth. And about the author, you must know that Dr. Ganesh Natarajan ji is Executive Chairman and founder of 5F World, a platform for digital startups, skills and social ventures in the country. He is also the co-founder of Global Talent Track, Skills Alpha and Lighthouse Communities Foundation, as well as 2 Indo-US joint ventures. Dr. Natarajan is also a member of the Central Board of Directors of State Bank of India and Chairman of the Board of Honeywell Automation India Limited. He has authored several books and is a regular writer and speaker at national and international forums. And आप में से जितने भी गेस्ट मेहमान हमारे साथ पिछले सेशन में बने हुए थे वो ऑलरेडी अनिरुद्ध सूरी जी के बारे में सुन चुके हैं, उनके बारे में जान चुके हैं. बट जो लोगों ने अभी ज्वाइन किया मैं आपको बता दूं, अनिरुद्ध सूरी जी इज अ वेंचर कैपिटलिस्ट, टेक्नोलॉजी एंटरप्रेन्योर, policy advisor and an author. He is currently the managing partner at India Internet Fund, which is a technology-focused venture capital fund based in India and the US. Previously, he has worked with Government of India in Delhi and McKinsey and many more. He is also the author of The Great Tech Game, जिसके बारे में जो डिस्कशन हुआ पिछले सेशन में हमने उस बुक की कुछ बारीकियां जानी. He has written extensively on foreign policy, geopolitics, national security, technology and entrepreneurship, and has served as the director of the board of the Harvard Alumni Association. And as the second discussion for this session, we are delighted to have the one and only Mr. Raghav Chandra ji, the director of the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival, author of 2 acclaimed novels, Scent of a Game about tiger poaching and Kali's Daughter about caste consciousness in high society. Chandraji is a former civil servant, alumnus of Harvard University, founder CEO of Consult app. मैं चाहूँगा तालियों से हम उनका स्वागत करें. And I think yes, we have the man of the moment with us. Dr. Ganesh Natarajan has joined us, and I would request the 3 gentlemen to please carry forward and ignite this wonderful and much awaited discussion. Over to you, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, Ganesh Natarajan ji. I have known you for a long time. One of the truly outstanding tech entrepreneurs, tech leaders, and also somebody who has a heart. And you know, that heart is very human and it goes beyond technology into a lot of social fields, a lot of academic areas, a lot of educational areas, and invariably I run into you into anything which is connected with education, academics, civil society, and in trying to promote people to do better. So a very, very hearty and warm welcome. Though you are far away, you couldn't make it, you tried your very best, but I know you had an international board meeting which prevented you from synchronizing it with this. But today, thanks to the technology that people like you have pioneered and people like you have helped to develop, today you are almost like as good as being in this hall. So a hearty welcome to you from the Bhopal Literature Festival.
Thank you very much, Raghavji, and really apologies for not being there in person.
And as you can see, the audience is giving you a very, very big hand.
Half our life is physical, half our life is virtual, so we'll have to make do. And good evening, and nice meeting you.
Great. And I'm also delighted to have in our midst a person whom all of you have heard until now, Anirudh Suri, who's again a tech guru in various ways, both in terms of entrepreneurship, in terms of writing and reading about it, and more importantly, in encouraging it, motivating it through promoting startups and ventures in the tech field. And he's become a bit of an expert now on the subject of how technology can be used in geopolitics. And it's not at all an old subject. It's something which is becoming new dimensions of this are emerging every which day. And as he said, knowledge is constantly, it's not finite, it's constantly evolving. So new ways of using technology for geopolitics are emerging, as we've seen in the Russia-Ukraine war, new kinds of drones. Today it's not possible for a big nation to immediately defeat a small nation. So all that goes to show that technology is indeed important. But today we have with us essentially Ganesh Natarajan Saab, who's going to, and once in one of his seminars, which I happened to be virtually attending, he mentioned Society 5.0. And so I would like Ganesh Natarajan Saab for you to tell us what do you mean by Society 5.0 before we take over and ask you for the questions.
Thank you very much, Raghavji. And let me explain it as simply as possible. And today, if you look at it in the post-COVID world, to my mind, Society 5.0 is becoming even more important. And let me first go backwards and say that, look, we all know that society has gone through 4 significant phases already. The first was, of course, the caveman era or the hunting society. People discovered agriculture and it became the agrarian society. Then, of course, there was Henry Ford and a lot of manufacturing focus. So the industrial society happened, which is Industry 3.0. And then with extensive information, as all of us know, information technology, robotics, automation, artificial intelligence, etc., all that created what we call the information society. Now, what happened was, and if any of you had happened to hear Ruchir Sharma and in his annual talk on trends in the world, one thing that clearly is emerging is that technology by itself, while it's important, it's an enabler, it cannot solve the world's problems. I mean, Raghavji, you alluded to Russia and Ukraine. I think, we are now facing the backlash of either too much of technology or not having thought about what is the use of technology, which is why Society 5.0 is emerging. Japan has in fact gone leaps ahead in terms of understanding Society 5.0. And essentially at its heart, it means that how do we build human-centric societies which are enabled by technology. I mean, today you've all heard of terms like metaverse, where people are saying that, look, you can have an alternate life literally on the internet. And this is going to happen. I mean, our children are already doing it. Many people who are doing gaming, etc., are spending more of the time on the internet than in the real world. But you will find that as Society 5.0 emerges, there will be a very thoughtful and heart-centric approach to saying, how do we make it inclusive? How do we develop technologies, whether it's artificial intelligence or IoT or whatever, which will actually enable many people, in fact, the entire 7 billion population of the world, to participate together. So essentially, that is technology, and that is Society 5.0. How do we ensure that the combination of technology and human centricity creates a better world for the future? Which is why people like me, who have kind of lived a life in technology and now spending more and more time in the social sector on large-scale social impact, I mean, we are very excited about these things, because that is probably the solution for India and many parts of the world.
Mr. Anirudh Suri, would you like to also, take on what Ganesh Natarajan Saab has said and give your own understanding of what Society 5.0 is and would be?
No, I think, so first of all, my congratulations, sir, to you, Mr. Natarajan, for, I think, articulating a concept, I think, in a very clear, succinct way that I think people can understand. And I think, actually, towards the end of our last panel, I was saying something similar, where I said that, and even in my book I talk about this, that technology ultimately cannot be the only solution in our lives. That our lives and us as humans, we are more than technology. And so I'll make 2 quick points to add on to what Mr. Natarajan has described. One is, and as I was writing my own book, some of the people I spoke to in the course of writing the book asked me a question that I was not prepared to answer. They asked me, are you a technology optimist or are you a technology pessimist? So when I first got that question posed to me, I didn't fully grasp the question. So I went in to understand these two terms. So I'll just very briefly describe them. Technology optimists are people often working in the tech sector who believe that technology will solve everything. What humans cannot solve, technology will solve. Corruption, technology will solve. Climate, technology will solve. Relationships, technology will solve. So there's a group of people in our world who are technology optimists in that sense. Then there's the group of technology pessimists who believe that technology is constantly leading to degradation of our values, of our world, of us as people. And I think as some of the questions earlier were also that technology has such massive negative implications that we must be very careful of technology. Those are technology pessimists. So as I thought about that question, I realized that I'm actually a combination of the two, and I then looked up, there's a term for that also, which is technology realists. So technology realists would be categorized people who
Are they more pessimistic or more optimistic? The realists?
It's again a spectrum. So realists would then be people who believe that technology can be used for solutions, but will never be the whole solution. So we were talking about climate technology, Mr. Natarajan, in the previous panel a little bit towards the end. And that's a very clear example of where technology can play a role, right? If it's carbon capture technology, yes. If it's electric vehicle batteries, yes. But unless we combine that technology adoption with, let's say, behavioral change and change in our essential value systems, we will not solve the climate crisis. If we continue to think that we can consume and consume and consume with no regard for the environment and just believe that somehow technologies will come that will solve the problem that our behavior is creating, then I think we are doomed, right? So that's one example, I think, to illustrate, I think, the concept of human-centric society and human-centric technology that I think Mr. Natarajan was describing. That's one. The second thing that I thought I'll add is this idea of values. So I think technology, interestingly, whether we realize it at that time or not, changes our values. So I think I briefly mentioned in the last panel about the example of industrialization. Industrialization, as a result of needing people to work in factories, created these urban agglomerations that have become the core of many of the cities around the world. And these cities have become just now mega cities. And coming from Delhi, I can tell you how pleasant it is to be in a city like Bhopal, where you go through the lake, the weather is nice, you know, there's greenery, but there's also like a certain level of manageability that you feel in this city, for example. And I think, sir, you're based in Pune, if I'm not wrong, right? I think, Mr. Natarajan, you're based in Pune.
Right. Essentially Pune. When he's not in New York or San Francisco.
Today I'm in Pune very much.
In Pune. So cities like these, I think in India, compared to a city like Delhi, so where you also live for a lot of your time, cities like these have been a ramification of industrialization in a way, the size of these cities at least, and that in turn has shaped our values. The values of people in Delhi today, even if they come from outside, get changed. And it's very important. We'll come back to our hometowns, we'll be different people, different values again. So that's a hint to tell you that technology shapes our values. When your child is on the phone all the time, it's not just a matter of just addiction or distraction, it's shaping their values also. So I think as we think about Society 5.0, it's very important that we have a values-first approach to thinking about what we want our Society 5.0 to look like. Technology, unfortunately, in the kind of juggernaut that we have experienced in the last 20 years, as phones and technology has gone into the hands of everyone, unlike earlier technologies which were only in the hands of a few, right? Factories and things were only in the hands of a few. Now it's in the hands of everyone. It's very important that we don't let this be a relationship where technology is the only one shaping our values. In fact, it must reverse. Our values must shape the design of technology, the use of technology. So we must start with a values first approach where we say, for example, if sustainability is one of the core values of Society 5.0, let's say, then we must ensure that the technologies that we are picking, the technologies we are designing, are actually sustainable to begin with. Blockchain being an example. We can very easily go into a blockchain and Bitcoin world, but the energy consequences of that are massive. And it's almost like the analog to industrialization is very clear in my mind. Industries at that time factories started thinking efficiency and cheap cost of products is my main value. And I don't care about the environment. 200 years later, now we are dealing with the ramifications. So I think similarly, as Sir was describing Society 5.0, I hope that we start with the values first approach.
Yeah, I think that's particularly relevant, and of course, the rule of law and governance issues are equally important, and values, of course, must define the rule of law, and the rule of law must define what we want really, inclusiveness in society. We want, equilibrium in society, safety, security, that there should be enough food for all, because human dignity is important. So, Mr. Natarajan, I would be very happy if you could define what the values which Mr. Anirudh Suri has talked of. What are the values and what are the parameters, the benchmarks for a human-centric society?
Okay, now let me give you a slightly long answer, Raghavji, because Anirudh made a lot of very important points. First, by the way, on a side note, my wife was born in Bhopal. So whenever I meet CM Shivrajji, he calls me MP ka damad. So it's probably true that I like Bhopal as much as you do. So, no doubt.
Wonderful.
The point on pessimism, Raghavji, there is a very interesting statement that a pessimist is normally a well-informed optimist. Because, people who blindly go as optimists are dangerous because they haven't really understood the full environment. Third, to come to the point on values, and as an aside, I remember almost 15 years back, I was in MIT, and we were jointly doing some research in Massachusetts on this whole concept of how will IT change over a period of time. And there was a book published called The Corporation of the 90s. And it's a very interesting point. The point they make is, initially, IT will follow businesses, in the sense that technology will do what you tell it to do. Eventually, IT will drive new business ideas. My optimism is that not only will values, as you rightly said, drive the way we design organizations, societies in future, but to a sense, we can also be encouraged by the available technology and start shaping values better. I'll give you an example. One of our biggest social initiatives, which we started in Pune and now is kind of expanding to Telangana and Delhi and Odisha and Uttar Pradesh, is something called Skills Lighthouses, which we do for the urban slums. And just to give you, we all know that today 3.0, so we keep kind of rediscovering how to do skills in this country, because the biggest problem, of course, we have is inclusion and people being unemployed. And we did a lot of research early on, and we found that, look, the reason why the initial NSDC and the skills mission was hardly successful, because in the initial phase, 12% of the people who had been skilled actually took up jobs, and out of the 12%, almost 70% dropped out in 3 months. We went out to design methods by which we could use technology, or what we call commonly available technology, uncommonly well. And let me give you an example. For instance, when a slum youth comes to one of our lighthouses, and we have 18 in Pune right now, and we try and tell him ki ye karo, he's not convinced. So he's come through 18 years of deprivation and bad behavior of the community. And we have to open his mind. So we use a lot of technology to give him ideas on what the world is all about. We were trying to tell people what it is to be a paramedic or somebody working in the operating theatre and helping the doctor. And he looks at the very gleaming Jahangir hospital near the lighthouse and he says, "Main to yahan kabhi kaam nahi kar sakta." Then we used virtual reality technology. We just gave him a headset, and then he goes in, and for 5 minutes he sees somebody looking like him, feeling the pulse of the patient, preparing the patient for the operating theatre, and he thinks, "Oh my God, agar ye kar sakti hai, to main bhi kar sakta hu." So it's almost like a gentle suggestion through showing and telling. Now, this is what I'm giving as an example of enabling something towards a goal that you have set, that this person must have more agency, more aspiration, and choose his own skill. At the same time, I mean, the excess of technology is a classic example we've seen in COVID. As all of us know, many of our children all went into a complete e-learning cycle for a year and a half. The sad reality is the learning loss children in schools in the last 2 years has been abysmal. I'm also on the board of a company called Educate Girls, which, by the way, does huge amounts of work in the tribal areas of Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and now Uttar Pradesh. And the number of girls who have dropped out of school in tribal areas in your state, for instance, is almost, I mean, I can give you the numbers, but it's staggering. And now we are kind of working to put them back. So this whole concept of, oh, e-learning se ho jayega, Byju's will make it happen, etc., and you're seeing the wheels of edtech falling apart. For the simple reason, it's just not enough to do everything through technology. Globally, if you look at e-learning, hardly 12% of the people who do these courses complete these courses. And the learning loss, again, is very, very significant. So again, the point I'm making by connecting all these dots is, A, please remember that what you said is absolutely right, Anirudh, that you must have a core set of values with which you start. But B, be open to the ideas that, look, you can have a plethora of technologies around you for businesses, for factories, for schools and colleges, for society. And in fact, the recent book we've just published is exactly about that. That we have a digital India for, which is a $1 trillion economy that will be done by 2025. And hopefully the Indian GDP will touch 5 trillion by 26-27. But the impact of digital India on almost every aspect of the growth process of the economy is what is going to be interesting. And there we have to be very watchful, as you right said, have a values lens to everything, and make sure we are not throwing technology at a process, but ensuring that we do it properly. So I think this is where human-centric societies, using technology, not being afraid of technology, those will be what. And I'm very, very excited about this, as you can see, because this is the way I think India will grow and become a significant success story in this decade.
So you've, projected it as an aspirational story, something which we should try and achieve, and you're optimistic that we will achieve it. But today we have a lot of areas where there are deficits in terms of the growing income and wealth disparities in society, in terms of some people not being able to adequately buy the kind of foods that they want to buy, in having their needs fulfilled the way they want to. So do you think that technology will be able to make up for these kind of disparities and deficits in society, the income and wealth inequalities, or you think technology will further exacerbate them and will get further weaponized to create such differences in society? I'm giving you the a counterpoint, a contrarian viewpoint only to provoke you. I'm essentially an optimist, but I like to provoke discussion. So Anirudh, would you also like to mention that before we get Ganesh to, Ajay, you have mic, before we get Ganesh to give his viewpoint?
Maybe we'll hear him first.
Any pessimistic viewpoints that you have?
Yeah, well, I can share one actually to add to the provocation. And in my book I talk about this also in the style section, where I a little bit of the research that I did on the economic inequality implications of tech. So today, the inequality levels we are seeing in the world stand, according to certain economists, stand the same level as pre-World War I era inequality levels. So pre-World War I era, roughly around 1910, let's say. And if you look, and if you are a student of history and you believe in learning from history, one of the things that comes out of that kind of inequality at that time is a massive backlash in the form of a socio-political movement or socio-economic movement known as communism, where certainly the capitalists of the time, the industrial capitalists of the time, who have a clear analog, according to some, to the tech capitalists of today's time, was trying to accumulate so much wealth that the labor class of that time was starting to see this massive disparity, and that gives fodder for a massive backlash in the form of these socio-economic movements, one. Second, it then eventually, after the world wars and in the middle, between the two world wars, leads to the European governments especially becoming labor welfare governments, where the state suddenly becomes a welfare state. the concept of the welfare state almost arises during that time as an implication of the inequality, right? So now, if you just take that for example and now pretty much copy paste it today, you're seeing in the US this rise of populism as exemplified by the rise of the Donald Trump era. You talk about Detroit vis-a-vis a San Francisco, and in my mind the same images of Europe pre-World War I era arise, and the worry that one can then have is that this kind of tech-driven economic inequality, if not managed, where certain people are trillionaires and certain people in our farms or the tribal areas that I think Mr. Natarajan's work is also in, are living as if they are living in the agricultural or the pre-agricultural era. So this kind of inequality will not just lead to economic inequality, but massive socio-political movements, backlash, and possibly geopolitical wars of the kind of the World War wars that we saw. So that's my secondary provocation to
so now
Mr.
you have
Nataraj.
enough provocations to
Now let me respond to the
provoke it
provocation by
further
saying
or
that.
to assuage our apprehensions.
You have to frame it differently. I'll tell you why. And I'll give you a real case. I mean, I grew up in a little village in Jharkhand. It's called Tatisilwai near Ranchi. And that's because my father was running a factory there. And my best friend was this village boy called Fantush. Even today, Fantush gets a total salary of 7,500 rupees per month and brings up a wife and 2 children on that. And I went back to discover him. I mean, after I finished my my last corporate stint in Zensar, 2016, I went back to Ranchi and it took a lot of time to find him because his real name obviously was not Fantush. It was Jamna Das Thakur. But I mean, I kind of discovered him at some point. Then he came and stayed with us. An interesting story because then at that time, demonetization happened. And the first phone call I get is a guy from Ranchi saying, Fantush, sir, Babu, मैं Fantush बोल रहा हूँ, आप ठीक तो है ना? I said, भैया मुझे क्या होने वाला है? He said, मैंने सुना है कि उधर बम्बई में मुकेश अंबानी भी राशन के लाइन में खड़े हुए. I was thinking, why would Fantush even come up with something like this? But then I realized, for him, there are some elements of society which are much, much bigger. Would he call up Mukesh Ambani? Of course he would not. Would he call up Ganesh Natarajan? Of course, because I've been his friend. I mean, I'm not very distant for him. So the reason I'm saying this story is, my belief, and this happened in South Korea well. Today, the average South Korean is extremely successful. There is very little real poverty in South Korea. But if you remember the chaebols in South Korea, the Samsungs and the Hyundais, etc., I mean, those owners were seen as far beyond the reach of humanity. So even today, and I'm just taking a few names, so, I mean, no disrespect to anybody, but if you take out the Adani, Ambani, Tata, Birla kind of layer, a lot of us are not very dissimilar from the rest of India. I mean, I do so much work in the social sector. I know that this boy in the Yerwada slum in Pune, his dreams are not very different from what mine were when I was growing up in Jharkhand. So that's the point I'm making. So the point is, if we can use the technology enabler to not have a big digital divide and leave the top 2% of our population out of it, because they are, I mean, either they made money because of family, whatever, or because they became a unicorn by sheer luck, doesn't matter. But if you take the rest of the 98%, my belief is that technology, Society 5.0 principles can make it happen. And in fact, we mentioned 3 things in our book that must happen for India. One is that we must use what I said earlier, technology as an assistive medium. That is very important for digital India. And everybody must be included. You cannot have the national optic fiber network not reaching the last 200,000 villages in India. So that will leave them out of development. A. B, we must ensure that everybody has aspiration. What I called agency earlier, which is a social sector term, aspiration to be a Ganesh Natarajan, to be an Anirudh, to be a Raghav Chandra, everybody should have in this country. Aspiration to be a Shah Rukh Khan or a Mukesh Ambani, not required. So that's the second part. And the third is, we must build pathways for them to develop and sustain their aspiration. Because if the doors are closed, whether you're from a different caste or a different community or a different gender, and some people feel shut out of development, then we have a problem. So we call it the trust deficit. And we're saying, please address the trust deficit, because once you have a trust deficit addressed, aspiration will build in the entire country, and we will use technology and other forces to make it happen. I know it sounds very optimistic, but we believe it can be done. I'm seeing it happening in the city of Pune. We're trying to do the similar experiment in Delhi. And my belief is, if enough of us intelligent people who want to make India successful happen, I think that will happen. I mean, you have a young woman sitting in the audience right there who just sent me a WhatsApp called Ambreen Zaidi. I'm sure Ambreen spoke during this. I mean, if you look at the work that Ambreen is doing, with army widows, etc. I mean, you need every potentially disenfranchised segment of society to be included. So whether it's Anita Bogle doing work for women, whether it's Ambreen Zaidi doing work for army widows, and there's so many of us, looking at LGBT and PWDs, etc. We've got to work together to make this country successful. But I'm an optimist. I really believe in the next 8 to 10 years, with progressive governments everywhere, it can happen. And once you have a real philosophy of public-private partnerships and cooperate with civil society partnerships, which is what people like me are trying to do, it'll definitely happen.
Very, very interesting and very, very, I would say, inspirational, that thought. Would you like to add to it, Anirudh?
No, I think I definitely share the optimism that Mr. Natarajan has expressed, because I do believe that there is that other argument, as you've very well articulated. I think that as we think about this in a systematic way, one suggestion comes to mind, which I'll share, which is, again to the conversation about unicorns that we were having earlier, being a bad or a misplaced metric for success in our country. I think you mentioned that the fiber optic systems must reach each village in our country, and I think that's an important point. And I think as a result, much like there has been this Human Development Index, right, the HDI report, which some of you will be familiar with, that I believe the UN comes out with, I think we must have a digital or a tech version of that report. What I in my book have tried to call the Digital Competitiveness Index, but the name doesn't matter. What matters more is that what that includes. And in my mind, it includes things like the infrastructure piece that you mentioned, which is how much of our population has access to that kind of broadband internet infrastructure. Second, how much of our population has access to the skills to match the aspiration. If today you want to be a Ganesh Natarajan, you need to be able to have access to the technology skills, scientific skills, at least some point in your career. So to what extent are we making sure that our education system is ensuring wide reach on that? Third, to what extent are we valuing people from across the not have a Ganesh Natarajan, and at the risk of repeating myself, if we don't have great researchers in this country? So instead of just highlighting the Mukesh Bansal, Sachin Bansals of the world, unless we start highlighting the work of scientific researchers as well, thinkers, big picture thinkers, artists, philosophers, I think a much wider group of people in this country, we'll have the risk of being very myopic in our definition of success, and I think that will end up being a problem.
Absolutely, and I think we need to also ensure that that technology doesn't just get commoditized. People should be able to feel excited about it, interested in it, feel included with it. Last mile connectivity is indeed important. Now they are taking the fiber optic network to the village panchayat level. I think that's the last bit of the program is left. And the community service centers that you're aware of, CSCs, they're also relevant in that this thing. Mr. Natarajan, the model of the CSC, as compared to the lighthouse model that you're talking of, can the lighthouse model be embedded and built upon the CSC model to make it more effective, or you think they are two different infrastructural structures?
No, they're actually not very different. But in fact, I remember when I was chairman of NASSCOM in 2008, we actually started looking at the CSCs and said, how can we take the Prime Minister's National Digital Literacy Mission and make them digital literacy CSCs in the cities? And as you know, the most successful implementation of CSCs had been in Madhya Pradesh. So joint venture with the MP government and TCS to start with, and very, very successful. Sadly, it has not been that successful in many parts of India. It's been used primarily as, maybe printing or information dissemination, not really for enabling capability, which is what we do. I mean, we allow learning asymmetries to be resolved in the lighthouse. So it's slightly different, but yes, to a certain extent, awareness, absolutely yes. But I'm just saying that but my belief is with quantum computing, 5G, etc., this will begin to happen. That's the optimism I have. That if you look at any country, it needs to develop physical, digital, and social infrastructure. Physical infrastructure, thanks to Mr. Gadkari and so many others, I think is coming up at a very rapid clip in our country. Digital infrastructure with Ashwini Vaishnav and Rajan Chandrasekhar doing what they're doing, and of course the full support of the whole government machinery, will happen hopefully by 2024, 2025. Social infrastructure, I've mentioned it too, and I don't want to belabor that point, that we have to build a climate in a liberal democracy, a society of inclusion. If we do that, and if you have enough people like the three of us on this forum who really want to avoid any lack of inclusion, the digital divide or the asymmetries, I think we can make it happen, sir. And that's why I said, whether it's the CSC as an instrument, the Lighthouse as an instrument, or any other technology-enabled equality kind of capability that we build, the platforms that we build, that will happen. I mean, today you look at UPI. I mean, in the State Bank of India, we always discuss UPI as a stellar example where India is leading the world. And if you take UPI as a success story built on the JAM trinity, Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, and mobility, the same thing will now apply to agriculture, to SME manufacturing, to education, to skills, to healthcare. And suddenly you have an opportunity which is unfathomable at this point of time. And I think we have 6 to 7 years to move from, I was with the State Bank board at a retreat 3 days ago, and Dinesh Kharaji, who's our chairman, Dinesh was making a presentation on how we moved from China being so much ahead of us to literally vying to be the China plus one story. And a lot of people believe that it can be an India plus one story. Because in this period where sadly China is going through a bit of a mess, I think if we build our story right, we can really make Indians proud of being Indian and being global leaders in the world.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Anirudh, would you like to add something to that?
No, just that quick anecdote actually. So I spent a little bit of time working in the Indian government in the IT ministry on the CSC scheme in 2010. Oh. And so one of the things that I actually helped the minister at that time build, the Minister of State at that time build, was a dashboard to assess the actual effectiveness and operationalization of these CSCs. Because often these CSCs were being put up there in name, but didn't have electricity, for example. But things have, that's right. No, radically improved since then.
And I think it's time now for us to allow the audience also to ask Mr. Ganesh Natarajan some questions. But before we go to the audience, one quick global sort of, sociological issue. How do you see things in the family shaping up, in terms of sociological structures? Do you think the family structure, thanks to the abundance of technology, avatars coming up, metaverse, creating new virtual environments, parallel environments, will institutions like marriage, institutions like family, all those be affected in a adverse way, positive way? A quick takeaway from you before we throw it open to the audience. I mean, as a futurist, as the Indian Alvin Toffler or the Indian, fifth wave person. Yeah, Ganeshi.
No, my quick response to you is that you can't take anything for granted. I mean, you're absolutely right about marriages. And I think it's a good trend. I mean, today's modern woman, yesterday I was talking to this young woman who grew up in Bhopal and, then moved to Rajasthan after getting married. And she found that her husband was, in the very traditional mode of, you must obey my instructions. Believe you me, she dumped him in 3 months and moved to Pune. I mean, she actually works for us. So people are not going to tolerate stupidities anymore, which is a very good sign and nothing to do with technology. So my belief is that, as the human being evolves, I think everybody has to be aware of their own rights. We cannot be subjugated by anybody. In fact, what we do in Educate Girls and in Lighthouses is to tell young women that, look, there is no glass ceiling. It's in your mind. But now you go out and make stuff happen. Exactly what Anita Bogle has written about in her beautiful book. So, and that's in the urban sector. But I'm saying it's going to happen everywhere. But will institutions be there because they've always been there? No. Institutions like marriage, like even parenting. If you look at all of us have 1 or 2 children and we kind of mollycoddle them to death till they finally tell us to lay off. Look at America. Most Americans would have 4 to 5 children. Their job is to put them through high school. After that, you find the money to go to college. I'm not funding you. And both societies are equally fine. I'm saying institutions that deserve to survive, which kind of morph with the needs of the participants in that institution, will survive. Even some of our private schools will not survive because if you're just taking money and not adding value, what's the point? I think that's really where I am. And I think the law of market forces or the law of what people really want to accomplish in their lives will drive. But I'm very optimistic that everybody is, I'm an Indian citizen, I have the same rights as anybody else, and let's make it happen.
Wonderful. So I'll throw it open to the audience. Would anybody like to ask Mr. Ganesh Natarajan or Mr. Anirudh Suri any questions? Yes, Mr. Shailendra Tiwari. No, there's a lady. I'll take the lady in the blue first. Madam, please introduce yourself, give your name, what you're doing, and a quick question.
Hello everybody, I am Shalini Rai. I'm a journalist, a freelance journalist. My question is about data privacy. We, whether we go to the supermarket, whether we go to watch a movie, all the data that is accumulated somewhere, what use is it being put to, and is it really necessary that we have to, share our phone numbers or other kinds of details at every step of the, every step of the way. The US has now, kind of overcome this. And since we kind of follow the West, isn't it time that we should also start thinking about data privacy very seriously? Thank you.
Mr. Natarajan, please.
No, that's a very good question. And the data privacy bill, which hopefully will come to light by July, August, will handle most of your concerns. And in fact, if you look at GDPR in Europe, or even as you mentioned, the US, if you don't want to give your mobile number somewhere, you have the right to say no. I go to many places where they say, sir, mobile number likhiye. So I'm saying, I'm going to write a fake number. आपको अपने bosses को दिखाना है, तो my name is James Bond and my mobile number is 007. I tell the security guard, मैं यही लिखने वाला. Okay, because he's doing it, and you can't tell him, why are you asking for mobile number? He's been told by somebody. But you have the absolute right not to give your mobile number to somebody. A. B, what data privacy eventually will come up with, and I know that's the way it will work out, is that people can, like for instance, we know, you'll be surprised, 675 slums in the city of Pune. My team knows exactly who lives in which jhopri, which child has gone to school, which student must go to a lighthouse or to a college, etc. Now, is this an invasion of data privacy? No. But if I now use that data and sell it to somebody to go and sell them mobile phones, that is invasion of data privacy. So what they call consent, okay, in Europe you have to take consent before you do anything with data. I think that will happen through the data privacy bill. And then you will find that, look, without your consent, nobody dares to sell you marketing messages or use your phone for something else. So I think it will happen. But again, it's always like, it takes two to tango, in the sense that somebody can come up with a law, but if you randomly give your password to your driver and do something else, then there's no data privacy, because then everybody has access to what you do. So certain restrictions that you put on yourself, that you will not share data unnecessarily, and make sure that you are respecting other people's data, I think is bound to happen. And within a year, I think you'll see a lot of things changing. Same thing happened with cybersecurity. Today, everybody is aware of cybersecurity for organization, networks, etc. And the same thing will happen personally with data privacy in the not so foreseeable, in the not so distant future.
Mr. Shailendra Tiwari.
I have gone through seriously the way Mr. Natarajan thinks.
Name also. Name and
Mr. Natarajan, I have one question. See, the whole technology and the digital India, there are assets, but design thinking is required, so that the life here in India, with its own tradition, then it catches the spirit of the world and goes ahead and makes it happen that we lead the world. Now this is the time. The digital India is doing very well. Technologically also, our IITs and our people, they are very good. But we lack in the skills. Third thing, there is no design thinking, so that everything is assimilated. Like I tell you a very small thing. Lot of people in the COVID time, they are accustomed to study at home. Okay? If we can use this technology to have a little less movement in the city, we can reduce the carbon. We can have some more time for a person to have a leisure in the metaverse or do some creative thinking in the home. But what is happening? A person living in the left side of the city goes to the right of the city, pollutes and consumes his energy almost 30 to 40% in the transporting from here and there. Similarly, the things which are available in the city, they are not consumed in the city, they are sold to the villages. And similarly, the village person, I don't know for what reason they come to the city. When we are
Tiwari
living
Sahib,
in
your
a
point is
global-
clear.
Yes.
Let me just convey what he said, if you're getting this thing, that he's talking about basically an urban or a design issue, not in terms of the design that we understand it, but in terms of planning issue to facilitate better transportation, better urban environments and all. Would you, Anirudh, Ganeshi, please mention, please.
Well, I'll make a brief point and then we can get Anirudh's view also. I mean, see, the whole future, in fact, if you look at one of the 5 pillars of Society 5.0, they call it next generation smart cities. And next generation smart cities, whether it's in transportation, whether it's in public services delivered to citizens, or of course it is what you just said, people can work from home and not cross from east to west of the city. All these will get enabled. The only point I want to make is going back to what Anirudh talked about, values. And in fact, today, I'm sure many of you have heard of this term called moonlighting. I myself know a young person in Bangalore. He is working for one large IT company. He's working for a second large IT company. Both are full-time jobs. He's also working for 2 startups and he's tripled his salary. And I asked him, "Bhai, tumhara ethics kahan gaya isme?" He said, "No, uncle, ethics is not to get caught." So, and that's where, Anirudh's point, and unfortunately, you may not believe this, I've done research on this. Almost 20% of the people in COVID who started working from home either were not working as per their responsibility or they were doing multiple jobs. So, unless we have a value-driven society, technology will give you all the capabilities, but we have to be able to trust. You remember I said the third important element we are talking about in our book is the trust society. People must be trustable, must prove they are trustworthy. If we don't do that, if we believe that our only thing is to do jugaad and somehow fool somebody else, then we're not going to progress as a society. And that's something we must instill in our children, in our grandchildren, to make sure that, I don't want to, I'm not a great fan of the West, don't get me wrong. But whether it's Japan or US, it is very unlikely that somebody will cheat at the level that I'm seeing happening even in big sectors like the IT sector. So I think if we do that, enable the technology to work, that's why I said human-centric society enabled by technology. But the human values, to go back to Anirudh's point, are extremely critical.
Anirudh, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. And I think the only point I'll add, sort of in response to your question, or to your suggestion rather, is that I think that point of design thinking that you mentioned, where for any product or service that today we are building or developing as an entrepreneur or as a government or as an organization, it must start with principles of design thinking where you start grounds up, first principles, what is the problem, what's the best solution, not what can I copy and copy paste here. Right? I think that's absolutely, point very well taken.
It's like for a startup, you ask, the first question is, what is the problem? Then you give the solution, rather than the solution finding, looking for a problem.
That's right. And I think, a startup like Meesho, for example, is a very good example of that, where the traditional e-commerce model in the US was that of Amazon. And yes, that got copied here. But at the same time, certain people, now I'm not saying that they'll be financially best successful or not, I'm not commenting on that. I'm just saying that they said there's a system in India where women in households recommend products to each other. Let's take technology, enable that process to happen at scale and allow sellers, even if they're not sitting in a city like Delhi, to be able to sell their products, right, nationally. I think that's an example of design thinking applied in the case of India. And I think that's what we need more and more of.
Indeed. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for such an enriching conversation. Zordar taaliyan honi chahiye. A big thank you to Ganesh ji for throwing light on such an important topic.
Thank you, Ganesh Natarajan Saab. Gentlemen, please give him a super big hand.
Absolutely. I would now like to invite Meera Das ji, the member of Society for Culture and Environment, to virtually present a memento to our author and guest Ganesh ji. Though the memento will be delivered to his address for sure, but it will be.
I wish your avatar was here to collect it.
Well, the memento.
We'll treat Mr. Anirudh Suri as your avatar for the moment.
For sure. And I would like to bring to the notice, Ganeshji, that this wonderful memento is the mascot of the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival 2023. It's the picture of a highly endangered bird called Lesser Florican. Can you please pan the camera into the picture? Yes. Yes.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yes, and it was captured by Padma Shri Bhalu Mondeji, who happens to be a guest at the BLF, and he also has a wonderful exhibition going on here in the Bharat Bhavan.
Where was this taken, Raghavji?
This was taken in Indore, in
Indore.
this Ramsar site of theirs, which is, what is that site called? But near Indore, Sirpur.
Sirpur.
Oh, really?
It was taken
Very nice.
sometime in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yes, Lesser Florican.
Oh, thank you so much. It's really wonderful.
IUCN's red list of endangered species.
Oh, okay.
Yes, so it will surely be couriered to you on your address, and we are really honored to have had you with us. एक और बार जोरदार तालियों से उनका अभिवादन करते हैं, स्वागत करते हैं, आभार प्रकट करते हैं. Thank you so much, Ganeshji, for being with us, being a part of the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival. Thank you so much to Anirudhji as well for being such a wonderful part. 2 continuous sessions with Anirudhji, and it just gets better every time when we listen to Anirudhji. And of course, Meeraji and Raghavji, thank you so much once again. Moving on, the journey of the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival has finally come to the last session of this festival. But मैं आपको बता दूं, ये सिर्फ आखिरी सेशन नहीं है.
Recording stopped.
हाँ, मेरी रिकॉर्डिंग? अच्छा, ओके. इस सेशन के बाद हम सब एक बहुत ही खास पेशकश देख पाएंगे, परफॉर्मेंस देख पाएंगे बाय श्रीमती लता मुंशी जी. तो इस इवेंट के बाद, इस सेशन के बाद कहीं जाइएगा मत. और and then it will be followed by the valedictory, जिसमें प्राइज डिस्ट्रीब्यूशंस होंगे और कंक्लूजन रहेगा. So for now, the last session for the final day of the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival 2023 is titled as Tribals and the War of Independence. And we are extremely elated to have तुहीन सिन्हा जी with us. जोरदार तालियों से उनका मंच पे स्वागत करते हैं, तुहीन सिन्हा जी. And he will be in conversation with Anandita Pan and Shriram Tiwari ji. मैं चाहूंगा वो इस मंच पे आए, तालियां उनके लिए भी होनी चाहिए. Tuhin A. Sinha is a best-selling author, columnist and a politician. He is acknowledged amongst the most prolific Indian writers with a maverick knack to experiment with new genres. Tuhin's recent releases includes a geopolitical thriller, Mission Shehengan, and the first 2 books of his trilogy around India's unsung heroes, The Legend of Birsa Munda and the Great Tribal Warriors of Bharat. He is also a popular media voice of the BJP and represents the party on prime-time news debates. Dr. Anandita Pan is an assistant professor at the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, IISA Bhopal. She obtained her PhD from the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, IIT Kanpur, and her MA from JNU, New Delhi. She researches and publishes in the areas of gender studies, Dalit feminism, and subaltern studies. As the second discussion for the day, we are glad to have Shriram Tiwari ji. He is a poet, critic, and media expert known for his varied interest in literature, art, cinema, and various activities related to procure cultural heritage, promote tribal and folk culture, and to support Indian values, its history, and other forms of art. Tiwari ji has also edited and published more than 100 books based on literature, art, cinema, Indian freedom struggle, and Swaraj. मैं चाहूँगा हम इस आखिरी सेशन में थोड़ी जानदार तालियों के साथ उनका अभिनंदन करें, स्वागत करें. सेम एनर्जी होनी चाहिए एंड मैं निवेदन करूंगा कि एक बढ़िया शुरुआत करी जाए इस आखिरी सेशन की.
किसी राष्ट्र का भविष्य तभी उज्जवल होता है जब वो अपने अतीत के अनुभवों और विरासत के गर्व से पल पल जुड़ा रहता है। भगवान बिरसा मुंडा ने अंग्रेजों से न केवल राजनीतिक आजादी के लिए संघर्ष किया, बल्कि आदिवासियों के सामाजिक और आर्थिक अधिकारों के लिए भी लड़ाई लड़ी। वंचितों और शोषितों के अंधेरे से भरे जीवन में सूरज की तरह चमक बिखेरी।
I hope I'm audible. So we have with us Tuhin Sinha, who is a well-known writer, and he has been writing quite a lot on the tribal movements and noted authors and noted figures in tribal movements. So my exposure to Tuhinji's books have been very interestingly, he has written already 2 books, and as I have noticed, his trilogy, the 3rd installment of his trilogy will be out in June this year. So many congratulations to Hinji. Absolutely. So we are really looking forward to it. I would like to start off this session by, asking you to shed a little bit more light on your first book itself, Birsa Munda, and what motivated you, and how has that journey been in general? Yeah.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be in Bhopal. So I grew up, like Bhopal, I grew up in a small town called Jamshedpur. And like Bhopal, outside of the city, even Jamshedpur has lots of tribal hamlets and lots of tribal settlements. Now, in our growing up days, while we would find the statue of Birsa Munda, every few kilometers within the city, and while there would be curiosity to know more about the icon, unfortunately, not only was there dearth of information, but also it was not considered fashionable to even talk about him. So, in fact, a few years ago, 2014 onwards, when the present establishment started talking about it, there was a fresh interest in India's subaltern freedom movement. And I have been an author from 2006, and I've written multiple genres. So I think I was grappling with a situation where I needed some fresh, a fresh narrative to work on. And Birsa Munda had been on my mind from 2015-16. Now the onset of the pandemic turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because due to paucity of time, I had not been able to invest adequately on the research of a subject like this. But when, the first lockdown happened, I realized that I won't find a better opportunity than this. There were for at least 2 to 3 months, everybody was locked inside the house. And I just, there was somebody who was in touch, another author, Ankita, who wanted to work together, and she also has written a couple of books independently. I said, this is the time, let's just start on it. So I think the first draft, along with a fair amount of research which I had done prior to the onset of the pandemic and all of that, I think by July 2020, the first draft was ready. And then obviously, like it happens when a book is quickly written, I decided to rewrite entirely, which took another year. And then it came out. So, but then, it happens most of the time when you choose a subject as big as this. I realize that there's an ocean of information which is still waiting to be to be found out. So I decided to make it a trilogy. So the interesting part of the subaltern freedom movement is that it predates the mainstream freedom movement or the reported freedom movement. It dates back to the early 1780s, and why Birsa Munda is important, or why I started it. Birsa Munda is somewhere, right in the middle of that tribal freedom movement, which started in the early 1780s and went on till about 1940. So he encapsulates some features or some characteristics of the earlier warfare, which was largely focused around guerrilla warfare of Tilka Maji in the early 1780s. And at the same time, post Birsa Munda revolution, a lot of changes happened. For example, the main antagonist of Birsa Munda's story was a missionary by the name of Father Hoffman. And in fact, Birsa Munda's time was the time when, apart from the feudal hardships or the financial subjugation which the community was being subjected to, conversions became one of the main weapons of the Britishers. So post Birsa Munda's revolution, in fact, the person he fought his agitation or he fought his revolution against, Father Hoffman, he was the person who was instrumental in convincing the Britishers to bring in a landmark reform which went by the name of Chota Nagpur Land Tenancy Act, which actually gave. So I think, even for the Britishers, a revolution of the magnitude of Birsa Munda's revolution was a big eye-opener, and it impacted the politics of at least that region, the eastern region, during that time.
Thank you so much.
बिरसा मुंडा और बल्कि हिंदुस्तान में लगभग 1763 सन्यासी फकीर विद्रोह के साथ, हाँ, सन्यासी फकीर विद्रोह के साथ एक तरह से आज़ादी का जो संघर्ष है वो हमारे यहाँ चालू हुआ, और इसमें वो सारे लोग थे जो ब्रिटिश सेना से हटा दिए गए लोग, किसान, मजदूर, जनजातीय समाज के लोग, है ना। तो मूसा अली, देवी चौधरानी, चिराग शाह, मजनू शाह एंड बिरसा मुंडा, बाबा तिलका माझी, तो ये बड़ा एक तरह से विस्तार है। और लगभग जो मेरी जानकारी है या जो मैं देख पाया कि लगभग 61 आंदोलन हैं जो जनजातीय समाज के द्वारा हिंदुस्तान की आज़ादी के लिए, जमींदारी प्रथा के सुधार के लिए, जंगलों के पर्यावरण के सुधार के लिए, जैसे एक बड़ा नारा उस वक्त प्रसिद्ध हुआ कि तुम एक पेड़ काटोगे हम एक सर काट देंगे। तो दुनिया का ये सबसे शायद आधुनिक नारा पर्यावरण की रक्षा के लिए भी है। और जैसे तिलका मांझी के बारे में कहा जाता है कि वो हिंदू मुस्लिम एकता के लिए भी उनने काम किया। तो सबसे बड़ी बात यह है कि जैसे बिरसा मुंडा हैं, बिरसा मुंडा को या जो जनजातीय समाज के जो क्रांतिकारी थे, तो दो तरह के सवाल मेरे मन में हैं। एक कि अंग्रेज़ लगभग 1757 से हिंदुस्तान में काबिज हो गए थे, उनका कब्जा एक तरह से हो गया था, लेकिन जो मुख्य समाज जो है, मेन स्ट्रीम जो है, उसको आते आते 1857 लगभग 100 साल हो जाते हैं। इस बीच में जो जनजातीय समाज के जो आंदोलन हैं, लगभग 61 आंदोलन जो हो चुके हैं या हो रहे थे, उनके बारे में भद्र समाज की कोई बहुत ज़्यादा न तवज्जो थी, न रुचि थी, न समर्थन था, ऐसा मुझे लगता है। तो ऐसा क्यों होता रहा?
इसके पीछे दो कारण हैं। एक तो स्वाभाविक है, ये मान लेना कि जो इतिहासकार हैं, हिस्टोरियंस हैं, आम तौर पर वो एक कॉलोनियल माइंडसेट रखते हैं। लेकिन दूसरा जो मैंने अपने रिसर्च में अनुभव किया, दूसरी एक जो लिमिटेशन वो ये है कि ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा जो सबॉल्टर्न हीरोज़ हैं, जो जनजातीय हीरोज़ हैं, उनके जीवन काल में उनके बारे में बहुत कम जाना गया था, क्योंकि आमतौर पे आपको पता नहीं था उस रेवोल्यूशन का, वो तो छोटा सा एक विद्रोह था, उसका क्या असर पड़ेगा। Most of these people were written in hindsight. So, like 2 decades after the death of these individuals, the society would wake up to the influence of what they had done. तो जब आप hindsight में आप किसी चीज़ को revisit करते हैं, तो वैसे भी जो प्रारंभिक sources of जानकारी, जो प्रारंभिक sources of information है, वो बहुत सीमित हो जाती है। तो एक तो ये बहुत बड़ा एक लिमिटेशन हो जाता है, बट फिर भी एक आप ही के सवाल से एक और बड़ा प्रश्न उठता है कि जो आज सवाल उठाए जा रहे हैं कि क्या इतिहास को पुनः लिखा जाना ज़रूरी है, वो इसीलिए ज़रूरी है क्योंकि जो किरदार महत्वपूर्ण थे और जिनको बाहर रखा गया था उनको उनकी उचित जगह मिलनी चाहिए थी. और ideally it should have happened 30 years ago, because you know, while I can understand that there was a colonial hangover in the first 2 or 3 decades post independence, this cleaning up should have ideally started by late 70s or late 80s, but it's better late than never.
बिल्कुल, क्योंकि जो आप कह रहे हैं कि जनजाति समाज के जो क्रांतिकारी थे या वॉरियर थे, जो भी हम उनको शब्द दें, तो उनको लगभग रिड्यूस कर दिया नंबर्स में. जैसे बिरसा मुंडा के साथ में 200 लोग मारे गए या 2000 लोग मारे गए. यहाँ जैसे मध्य प्रदेश में टंट्या भील हैं और बहुत सारे जो लोग हैं, शंकर.
इसका एक और कारण आपको बताता हूँ कि आज़ादी की लड़ाई जो जनजातीय क्षेत्र में लड़ी जा रही थी, वो जो मेन स्ट्रीम पॉलिटिकल फ्रीडम मूवमेंट थी उससे कहीं अलग थी, कहीं पेचीदा थी. इट वॉज फार मोर लेयर्ड in the sense that most of these tribals were not directly fighting against the Britishers. The Britishers had outsourced the rule in tribal areas to 2 of their offshoots. One was the feudal landlords, and from 1850s onwards, as a very concerted policy, it was through to the German missionaries. And German missionaries obviously had certain targets. They were given certain targets every year that you need to convert these many Adivasis every year. So the Adivasis' fight against the British was never a direct fight. It was a very complicated fight. Most of the times they would end up fighting up against the feudal landlords, against the missionaries, only to realize in many cases they were not even aware that the main culprit is the Britishers. So in one of the books, the third part of the trilogy that I'm working on, which is on Siddho Kano, the 1855 Santhal insurrection, and which will be out on the day of Santhal insurrection this year, the day when it started, 30th June. For a long time, most of the people who were with the soldiers who were with Siddho and Kano, the 2 protagonists of the movement, were not even aware that they would face the Britishers. They were primarily fighting against the landlords. So I think these complications make it very difficult to document these movements in entirety. आप इस वक्त कह रहे हैं कि 61 आंदोलन थे, हो सकता है कि वो 600 आंदोलन हो आपको, और ये भी हो सकता है कि उसमें बहुत सारे आंदोलन जो है बिना बात के अज्ञानता में, वो एक जो होता है जब व्यक्ति पढ़ा लिखा नहीं होता है तो उसको उकसाना बहुत आसान होता है. गरीबी वैसे भी, जो गरीबी में आप मतलब आपकी प्रोवोकेशन, आप बहुत आसानी से प्रोवोकेट हो जाते हैं. तो हो सकता है वो 61 की जगह वो 20 हो सकता है कि वो 600 हो. But these are the challenges one faces when one documents subaltern history, and especially many decades after the movements actually happened.
ये तो बहुत अच्छा है कि कम से कम जो हिस्ट्री रिटर्न फिर से लिखने की जो बात है, तो कम से कम 2020 में ही सही.
और यही चैलेंज मैंने भी फेस किया था. देखिए, ये तीनों किताब की रूपरेखा अलग है. तो जब बिरसा मुंडा पे हमने काम करना शुरू किया, I realized that, you know, the kind of evolution his life went through every 5 years. For example, at one point of time, he got baptized because that was the precondition for him to get converted, to get admission into a missionary school. Then he shunned Christianity, came out of it. The same villagers, the same people in his village who were looking up to him कि ये तो पढ़ लिख कर आएगा वापस और हमारी community का नाम रोशन करेगा, या the same people shunned him, and eventually he spent 4 years in wilderness. When he re-emerged as a spiritual healer. तो इतना कुछ था बिरसा मुंडा के जीवन में कि मुझे लग रहा था कि इसको अगर मैं पूरी ऑथेंटिसिटी के साथ नहीं ला सकूं, उससे बेहतर होगा कि उसको एक नॉवेल के फॉर्म में लाऊं. तो इस वजह से तीनों किताबों की रूपरेखा अलग हो जाती, तीनों कहानियां की. बिरसा मुंडा इज अ नॉवेल. While I have maintained utmost sincerity to the essence of Birsa Munda's character, there is some amount of dramatization insofar as the other characters are concerned. The idea was to make the book reach out to maximum young readers, to make it more and more palatable to the youth, which it has managed to do. With the second book, The Great Tribal Warriors of Bharat, it is a collection of essays essentially, of 17 different tribal warriors from across the country. The third book again, in terms of the depth of the story, the depth of the trajectory of the two brothers, again, it's a novel. While we have retained the authenticity insofar as the main protagonists, Siddho Kano, are concerned, The other villains, again, जब आपको प्रोटैगनिस्ट के बारे में ही इंफॉर्मेशन निकालना इतना मुश्किल होता है, तो विलेंस के बारे में वो फादर हॉफमैन होंगे या वो और ज़्यादा मुश्किल होता है. So we have gone in for a fair amount of dramatization in that story again, and that explains why each book has followed a different pattern. But the main objective is that these stories need to reach out to maximum number of people, and the characters need a place in history which they have been denied.
Thank you so much for the very insightful background into the story, which leads me to a couple of questions basically.
Absolutely.
First and foremost, you mentioned a very important thing, that the motivation behind this and what it was leading to was basically to create a subaltern perspective, a history that was alternate to the dominant one that was presented about the tribal warriors. So my first question to you would be, can you envision your books contributing to this newer sort of way of writing history?
See, books are the foundation today, and interesting stories get converted into audiovisual medium. So in fact, Birsa Munda was acquired by Viacom, the parent company of Colors. At one point of time, we were almost certain that it was supposed to come on air as a mega historic series starting on his birthday on 15th November, the previous. But then due to the huge COVID period, the ad revenues of many channels have gone down, and for any massive budget show, they have kind of postponed their immediate plans. So books are merely the foundation. The idea eventually is to convert the same into children's narrative. So in fact, going ahead from here, I would want to bring out each of these books into a children's series. And in fact, with the new education policy making a clear provision for inclusion of such books in the course curriculum, I think there is a huge market where Standard 4 to Standard 6 students can grow up reading these stories. So I think the scope is enormous, and that is why the first thing to do was to write these books, and which I have started with.
Thank you. So which also, there's a connected question with that. You mentioned that, when you were dramatizing the character of Birsa Munda, one of the biggest challenges was the lacuna in documents basically on their lives. And as you also said, these are real life characters. So are real life people also. So how did you go about collecting maybe the archives, or how did you experience that kind of research?
So 3 ways. One, we have utilized all information available on public domain. We have referred to all history books. There are 2 books credible books on the life of Birsa Munda which I could come across, and both of them were written about 30-40 years ago. One was written by an IAS officer who has been a collector in some of the districts where Birsa Munda's revolution took place, K.S. Singh. I refer to his book, I refer to another book, plus, like I mentioned, all information. Plus, I spoke to a couple of people from the Munda community, including Kariya Munda, who has been one of the oldest serving Munda MPs. So, like I said, but this information had to be assimilated into a form that I wanted to give to the book, which is a slightly storytelling form, which is a slightly novel adaptation form, which is what it is eventually.
Okay, thank you sir.
क्योंकि ये बहुत गंभीर और जोखिम भरा काम है जो आप कर रहे हैं, क्योंकि अक्सर जो हुआ है कि सोसाइटी में जनजातीय समाज के लोगों को एक मानवीय पहचान पाना भी बहुत मुश्किल रहा है, जो अभी बीच में धीरे धीरे करके वो पहचान बन रही है. तो उनके बारे में जैसा कि मैं बात कर रहा था कि उनका जो योगदान है या उनका जो सेक्रीफाइस है, उनकी जो सफरिंग है, उसके बारे में डाटाज मिलते नहीं हैं. मैंने सरकारी रिकॉर्ड में भी आप गजेटियर में जाएं या दूसरी तरफ से जाएं तो भी वो बहुत सीमित जानकारी मिलती है. और अक्सर ये होता है कि जैसे कहा कि बिरसा मुंडा के साथ इतने लोग शहीद हो गए, कितने लोग थे, कौन थे, या टंटा भील के साथ हुआ, या और तिलका माझी के साथ हुआ, या शंकर शाह, रघुनाथ शाह के साथ हुआ, ऐसे बहुत सारे जो नाम हैं. और ये संयोग की बात है कि पिछले 15-20-25 साल में ये नाम निकल के आने भी लगे हैं. क्योंकि 1857 के बारे में जब बात होती है, मतलब ये देखिए कि वो सारे जो लोग जो एक तरह से असहिष्णु रहे हैं जनजातीय समाज के साथ, जो बात की गई 1763 में ये विद्रोह का सिलसिला चालू हो जाता है और लगभग वो 1857 तक हो जाता है। तब जाके जो जमींदार है, राजा महाराजा हैं या और जो भद्र समाज है, तब वो जाके निकलना शुरू करते हैं, है ना। बहादुर शाह जफर आते हैं, सब आते हैं, लेकिन उनकी जानकारी मिल जाती है। सावरकर उनके बारे में तो 1857 पर लिख देते हैं, लेकिन जनजाति समाज के जो वॉरियर हैं उनके बारे में समाज को लगभग 2020 तक या 2010 तक इंतज़ार करना पड़ता है। ये चिंता की बात भी है और खुशी की बात भी कि चलो अब तो हो रहा है। तो इसके लिए आपको धन्यवाद और
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद, थैंक यू। देखिए कितने लोग मारे गए या ऑथेंटिसिटी, मेरे ख्याल से वो एक ऐसा सवाल है जिस पर कि हम लाख चाहकर भी बहुत कुछ नहीं कर सकते। हम क्या कर सकते हैं वो ज़्यादा इम्पोर्टेंट है। एंड वन एडवांटेज विच आई हैव इज, you know, because I have been politically active, I keep raising these issues on all forums. जैसे बिरसा मुंडा की कहानी जो है किताब में निकलने के साथ समाप्त नहीं होनी चाहिए। दुम्बारी बारू एक मेमोरियल है रांची के पास, खूंटी ज़िले में 30-40 किलोमीटर दूर है, 40-50 किलोमीटर दूर है रांची, जहाँ बिरसा मुंडा की आखिरी लड़ाई हुई थी, जहाँ लगभग 300-400 आदिवासी शहीद हुए थे। क्या वो भारत की जनजातीय समाज द्वारा लड़े गए सारे युद्ध या सारी लड़ाइयों में शहीद जनजातीय योद्धाओं का सबसे बड़ा वॉर मेमोरियल बन सकता है? ये सवाल ज़्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है, जो मैं अपने तरीके से बीच बीच में उठाता रहता हूँ। बिरसा मुंडा का गांव सिद्धो कानो का गांव आज साहिबगंज डिस्ट्रिक्ट में आता है, जो उत्तरी झारखंड में आता है। बिरसा मुंडा का गांव जो है वो उलीहातू या वो दक्षिण के झारखंड में आता है। दोनों की दूरी 400 किलोमीटर। क्या एक नेशनल हाईवे बन सकता है जो दोनों के गांव को कनेक्ट कर सके? मेरे ख्याल से ये जो है नैरेटिव को, इस तरह की बातें जो हैं और बढ़ाती हैं। और मेरे ख्याल से आज ये क्षेत्रीय आइकन्स नहीं रहने चाहिए। ज़रूरी ये है कि अल्लूरी सीताराम राजू, जो हालांकि ट्राइबल थे नहीं लेकिन एक राजपूत थे, जिन्होंने अपनी पूरी जीवन जो है ट्राइबल्स के लिए लड़ने में समर्पित की। अल्लूरी राजू आंध्र प्रदेश को बिलोंग करते थे। क्या बिरसा मुंडा की कहानी अल्लूरी राजू के गांव में प्रचलित हो सकती है, सुनी जा सकती है? और वाइस वर्सा, क्या अल्लूरी राजू की कहानी तांत्या भील के गांव में सुनी जा सकती है? तो मेरे ख्याल से ये एक और बड़ा चैलेंज है कि इनको क्षेत्रीय आइकन्स तक हम सीमित ना रखें। जब मैंने ये पुस्तक लिखी और रांची में पहला लॉन्च हुआ था, तो मुझे वहाँ के स्टेट प्रेसिडेंट है बीजेपी के, उन्होंने बताया कि ये तो एक समय सिर्फ 3 जिले के आइकन्स माने जाते थे, आज पूरे देश के माने जा रहे हैं। तो मेरे ख्याल से यही एक चैलेंज हम सबको स्वीकार करना चाहिए कि तांत्या भील की कहानी, क्योंकि इश्यूज सेम थे, एंड इवेंचुअली इट्स अ विक्ट्री ऑफ द ह्यूमन स्पिरिट स्टोरी। Today's Birsa Munda need not be a revolutionary. He could be somebody who brings in a digital revolution, or tribal who decides to bring in a digital revolution in his village, who fights against odds and makes it a success. तो आयाम बदल गए हैं, चुनौतियां वही हैं, और मेरे ख्याल से eventually most of these stories are essentially victory of human spirit stories. So to the
Okay, thank you so much. Now the session is open for question and answer. किसी को अगर प्रश्न पूछना है तो प्लीज़।
इतना पैक्ड हाउस देखकर अच्छा लगता है, तो मुझे लगा बहुत सारे सवाल होंगे। जी लक्ष्मी जी। मुझे किसी ने कहा था, इन लाइफ देयर आर नो फैक्ट्स, ओनली इंटरप्रिटेशंस। तो मैंने इसलिए कहा, मुझे किसी ने कहा था और मैं मानता हूँ उस बात को, कि इन लाइफ देयर आर ओनली नहीं, in life there are only interpretations, no facts. Sorry, मैंने गलत क्या कहा था. तो अगर आप जितनी भी ऑथेंटिकेटेड माने अपनी हिस्ट्री बुक को, क्या गारंटी है कि वो ऑथेंटिकेटेड है? आप उस युग में तो वापस नहीं जा सकते ना. ज़रूरी ये है कि जो मैसेजिंग है वो कायम रहे, जो अच्छी बातें हैं समाज के लिए वो निकलती रहे, और थोड़ा सा 18-19-20, 18-20 या 19-20 होती है कहानी, तो उसमें मुझे नहीं लगता है कि कोई अंतर पड़ती है, एज लॉन्ग एज यू आर ट्रू टू द एसेंस ऑफ द कोर कैरेक्टर, द प्रोटैगनिस्ट. तो भगवान राम, अगर आप रामायण के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं, तो राम की कैरेक्टर का एसेंस को बरकरार रखते हुए अगर आप थोड़ा सा इम्प्रोवाइजेशन सुग्रीव के कैरेक्टर में कर दें, तो मुझे नहीं लगता कि उससे रामायण को कोई क्षति पहुंचती है, या उससे रामायण की जो प्योरिटी है वो समाप्त होती है. रीच, ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा लोग पढ़ें, जानें इन कहानियों को, अपने तरीके से इंस्पायर हों उन कहानियों से.
We had another question from the back.
अच्छा.
अच्छा, we'll take.
कहानियाँ सुनाई देती हैं, उसको आप कितना ज़्यादा तवज्जो देते हैं? और क्योंकि जहाँ डेटा एग्जैक्ट नहीं है, ये लोग जो इनके धार्मिक विश्वास है या उससे जुड़ी जो कहानियाँ आप बताते हैं, तो आप उसको कितना तवज्जो देते हैं?
एज ए राइटर मैं मानता हूँ इस चीज़ को कि वन हैज़ टू हैंडल दीज इश्यूज इन अ वेरी डेलिकेट मैनर. जैसे आदिवासी समाज में और विशेष तौर पर झारखंड में एक बड़ी समस्या है. एक बिल वहाँ की सरकार ला रही है सरना धर्म को लेके. वहाँ के जो मुख्यमंत्री हैं वो खुले बयान देते हैं कि आदिवासी कभी हिंदू नहीं था और ना कभी रहेगा. तो ऐसी स्थिति में what does one do as a story writer? I have played it safe. मैंने एक रिसर्च पेपर को एक रेफरेंस पॉइंट बनाते हुए 1800 पेजेस का एक रिसर्च पेपर है, जिसमें शिव का पूजन जो है, भले आदिवासी अपने आप को जो कहें, मैं मानता हूं कि वो सनातन धर्म के हिस्से हैं, अभिन्न हिस्से हैं. करिया मुंडा जी जिनसे मेरी डिटेल में बात हुई है वो भी यही मानते हैं. लेकिन कम से कम शिव की पूजन जो है वो तो मतलब उसका प्रमाण है कि आदिवासी पिछले 2000 साल से कर रहे हैं. तो जो अपनी राइटिंग में मैंने उनको शिव की पूजन करते हुए दिखाया है, बियॉन्ड दैट दे आर नेचर वर्शिपर्स, वो भी दिखाया है. सिंगा बोंगा वहाँ
माइक दे दीजिए आप प्लीज, ताकि सब आपकी बात सुन पाए.
जितना मैंने बात की है आदिवासी समाज के लोगों से, उनका ये मानना है कि जो उनके आदि देव हैं, हम उनका फॉर्म दूसरा हो सकता है, लेकिन वो अपना आदि देव जो है वो शिव और पार्वती को ही मानते हैं, और बड़ा देव के रूप में भी कुछ जनजातियां उनकी पूजा करते हैं.
जो लोग भ्रमित कर रहे हैं समाज को, उनके खिलाफ हमें अपने तरीके से नैरेटिव बनाना पड़ेगा. जो आप पढ़िए बिरसा मुंडा को बहुत उसमें संवेदनशीलता के साथ और बहुत चतुराई के साथ शिव का पूजन भी दिखाया गया है, सूर्य पूजन भी दिखाया गया है. सरना जो पेड़ माना जाता है वहाँ भी आदिवासी अपनी पूजा अर्चना करते हैं, वो भी दिखाया गया है.
जी, और एक छोटी सी टिप्पणी करें, अगर आप कन्वर्जन पे जो चल रहा है इसमें बहुत तेजी से,
वो एक अलग विषय, बट कन्वर्जन इज एन एज ओल्ड प्रॉब्लम, नॉट जस्ट इन इंडिया बट एवरीवेयर. आई थिंक देयर शुड बी स्ट्रिक्टर लॉज, बट predatory proselytization is a bigger issue which should stop.
I am Meera Das.
Yes, ma'am.
Just very small question. ये क्वेश्चन ये है कि आपका जो भी सोर्स है, वन आई कम्प्लीटली सपोर्ट कि इनके बारे में लिखा जाना चाहिए, और ये हमारे
सपोर्ट
कि इनके बारे में लिखा जाना चाहिए. These are the heroes from our ground, from our earth. लेकिन जो भी आप लिख रहे हैं वो मिथ के रियलम, इट शुडंट बी अ लेजी हिस्ट्री. लेजी हिस्ट्री नहीं होनी चाहिए, रिसर्च पक्की होनी चाहिए, बहुत ऑथेंटिक होनी चाहिए, और जहाँ जहाँ से आप रेफरेंस ला रहे हैं उसका रेफरेंसिंग करना चाहिए. और जो आप रेफरेंसिंग नहीं कर रहे हैं, किसने क्या बोला, ये आपने कौन से टेक्स्ट से कहाँ से उठाया, लेजी हिस्ट्री जो है ना, उससे माइंडसेट भी नहीं बदलेगा
But
उससे
it
आप
being a lazy history is an assumption.
लेजी हिस्ट्री इन द सेंस कि आप उसको रिफ्यूट करिए आपने जिस जगह से
No, no,
उसको लिया है
But I think you're being presumptuous by calling it lazy history because
I'm not making any comment
No, no,
on your
I-
this thing but
I said, I clarified that right at the start, that realizing my limitations, because I'm not a professional historian, I took the extra care to bring Birsa Munda out in a novel form.
which is very
Yeah.
extremely appreciable and this is I'm so glad that you mentioned it कि हम ये novel के form में लिख रहे हैं but आप जहाँ उसको I mean I'm just making a statement I'm no comment
But
on the
वहीं
whole
दूसरी
thing.
ओर, the second book of the series is a collection of essays in a non-fiction form, because of everything, you know, the source material is clearly mentioned
Exactly.
towards the end,
and I quite appreciate that you've taken up a very difficult subject जहाँ
thank you so
sources
much,
नहीं
ma'am.
हैं.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next question, please. Yes. Please raise your hand. Yes. Yes, sir.
I have one thing in mind.
Sir, please
See,
keep mic close to your hand.
All these tribal myths, if internationally if we collect, and then we decode it into modern times, then I think we'll find that there are some commonalities there, and that commonalities is basically very human, because the human race has evolved when the post era of the civilization, when the man has come from the caves, and then he became, if we call it them, the tribal. So they have a very, very good understanding and survival system among themselves. Like when they take a decision, I was going through the Golden Bough, they say that if two conflict is there between the two groups, they say that, okay, we can take the decision that in the 7th generation, what will be the best for the whole, both the groups. And then they reach, and they decode it. This is such a, this thing, it is revealing to me that, see, they were able to solve their problems. And in this modern society, we are not able to solve the problems. So,
No, so in fact, taking these books ahead, one of the ideas which I'm working on is leadership lessons from the tribal communities and the leaders. So yes, today I went briefly for the Bhopal Heritage Walk, and I was very fascinated to know that apart from Raja Bhog, apart from the Begums, Bhopal also has a rich history of Gond rulers, which is a tribal community. So I think the contribution of the community is phenomenal, and to typecast them in any one manner would be very limiting. But yes, I think Bhopal should take the lead in being the epicenter of fresh research and fresh evolution of study material around the community.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. तुहीन जी, अनंता जी और श्री राम जी, जोरदार तालियां होनी चाहिए इन दोनों तीनों के लिए for that amazing discussion.
Thank you very much. It was lovely to see such a involved, such a passionate audience, and I look forward to being here more often.
And we look forward to having you as well.
Thank you, ma'am.
मैं मीरा दास जी को बुलाना चाहूँगा मंच पे in order to present a memento on behalf of the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival as a symbol of love and respect from our team and for the amazing discussion that we have had. और इतने सन्नाटे के साथ नहीं, मुझे लगता है तालियों के साथ बेहतर लगता है. Yes, there it is. Thank you so much, Tuhin ji, for being a wonderful torchbearer of this session on the tribals. Give a big hand, ladies and gentlemen, for the author, Tuhin A. Sinha ji. And of course, along with the author, the two wonderful discussants जिन्होंने इस discussion की नाव को आगे बढ़ाया और बहुत ही बेहतरीन तरीके से हमारे सामने इस discussion को पेश किया, Anandita Pal ji and Sri Ram Tiwari ji. Yes, जोरदार तालियां होनी चाहिए. Anandita Pan ji and Sri Ram Tiwari ji along with that. And for those who have joined us recently, let me tell you this picture जो आप मेमेंटो पर देख रहे हैं, it's the picture of a highly endangered bird called Lesser Florican, which is found near Indore, Sirpur, and it was captured by Padma Shri Bhalu Monde ji जो पहले दिन से हमारे साथ बने हुए हैं एज अ गेस्ट एट द BLF, जिनका एग्जीबिशन भी ज़रूर आपने देखा होगा, खूबसूरत तस्वीरों का एग्जीबिशन. And there it is, the lesser floric and the beautiful bird, unfortunately getting endangered. So this was the last session, पर ये अंत नहीं है. कहते हैं अंत अनंत होता है, क्योंकि अंत खत्म नहीं होता, अंत के बाद भी एक शुरुआत होती है. So एक खास पेशकश आप सभी के लिए हम करने वाले हैं. It is going to be a performance by श्रीमती लता मुंशी जी. डॉक्टर लता सिंह मुंशी जी हमारे देश के सुप्रतिष्ठित अंतर्राष्ट्रीय ख्याति प्राप्त भरतनाट्यम नृत्यांगना है. मध्य प्रदेश की एकमात्र नृत्यांगना है जिन्होंने न केवल भारत अपितु विश्व के अनेक देशों की यात्राएं कर अपनी कला का परचम फहराया है. अपने देश के लगभग सभी प्रतिष्ठित समारोह में अपनी नृत्य प्रस्तुतियां दी हैं और बड़े बड़े देश जैसे रूस, तजाकिस्तान, सिंगापुर, ऑस्ट्रेलिया, फिजी, फ्रांस, कनाडा, जर्मनी, मलेशिया आदि अनेक देशों में अपनी नृत्य प्रस्तुतियां कर प्रशंसा प्राप्त की है. अपने भरतनाट्यम नृत्य शैली के प्रदर्शन के साथ साथ कई नेक प्रोग्राम भी उन्होंने किए हैं, जहां सभी समीक्षकों द्वारा उन्हें बहुत सराहा गया है. आपको अनेक प्रतिष्ठित संस्थानों द्वारा विभिन्न सम्मानों से विभूषित किया गया है. इसके साथ ही साथ आप अभी तक अपनी अनेक श्रेयाओं को प्राप्त कर चुकी हैं, जो प्रदेश और देश के अनेक नगरों में भरतनाट्यम के प्रचार प्रसार से संलग्न है. और हाल ही में आपको वर्ष 2018 में मध्य प्रदेश के सर्वोच्च शिखर सम्मान से भी विभूषित किया गया था. मैं चाहूँगा जोरदार तालियों से उनका अभिनंदन होना चाहिए. और अब मैं आरोही मुंशी जी को ये माइक संभालने के लिए दूंगा ताकि वो हमें इस खास पेशकश के बारे में और अवगत करवाएं.
नमस्कार. आज हमारी गुरु डॉक्टर लता सिंह मुंशी जी की कुछ शिष्याएं भरतनाट्यम नृत्य प्रस्तुति देंगी. पहली प्रस्तुति होगी पंचतत्व. चूँकि ये भोपाल लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल है तो उसी को नज़र में रखते हुए आज हमारी गुरु ने कुछ प्रस्तुतियां तय की हैं. पंच महाभूत पृथ्वी, जल, अग्नि, सृष्टि सृजन, जीवन का विकास एवं प्रत्येक पदार्थ का अस्तित्व भारतीय दर्शन में माना गया है. इन पंच महाभूतों में अग्नि का विशिष्ट स्थान माना गया है और हमने भी अपने विद्वानों से सुना है कि क्यों उनका विशिष्ट स्थान है. तो प्रस्तुत है पंच महाभूत.
श्री पंचभूताय शांति श्री गणेशाय नमः। शांति अग्नि शांति अग्नि शांति वायु शांति वायु शांति वर्ण शांति वर्ण शांति सूर्य शांति सूर्य शांति चंद्र शांति चंद्र शांति सप्तऋषि शांति सप्तऋषि शांति
अगली प्रस्तुति महाकवि सूर्यकांत त्रिपाठी निराला जी के अमर महाकाव्य के बादल राग से एक अंश पर प्रस्तुत की जा रही है। झूम झूम मृदु गरज गरज घन घोर, राग अमर अंबर में भर निज रोर। इस अंश में बादलों का उमड़ना घुमड़ना, गरजना इत्यादि का सुंदरता से वर्णन किया गया है। वर्षा के स्याह मेघ जब उमड़ते घुमड़ते हैं तो लगता है जैसे उथल पुथल मच गई हो। बादलों के आपस में टकराने से गर्जना का शोर, बिजली के चमकने का शोर और नदी नालों झरनों में बहते हुए पानी का शोर अपने पूरे उन्माद पर है। इन प्रस्तुतियों में नृत्यांगनाएं बादल का आह्वान कर रही हैं। एक और बादल राग जीवन निर्माण के नए राग का सूचक है, वहीं दूसरी ओर भैरव संगीत को भी इंगित करता है, जो नव निर्माण का कारण बनता है। प्रस्तुत की जा रही है बादल राग में नदी, बिजली की बाहें, गंजित विशेषताओं को सौंदर्यपूर्ण भंगिमाओं के द्वारा दर्शाया गया है। प्रस्तुत है बादल राग।
धूम धूम तक टक्का टिक टक धूम धूम तक टक्कई टिक टक घूम घूम तक टक्का टिक टक धूम धूम तक टक्कई टिक टक घूम घूम तक टक्का टिक टक धूम धूम तक टक्कई टिक टक घूम घूम तक टक्का टिक टक धूम धूम तक टक्कई टिक टक घूम घूम तक टक्का टिक धूम धूम तक टक्कई टिक घूम घूम तक टक्का टिक धूम धूम तक टक्कई टिक धूम धूम तक टक्का टिक धूम धूम तक टक्कई टिक धूम धूम तक टक्का टिक धूम धूम तक टक्कई टिक धूम धूम तक धूम तक धूम तक धूम तक धूम तक धूम तक धूम धूम तक धूम धूम तक धूम धूम घन घोर झूम झूम मृदु गरज गरज घन घोर झूम झूम मृदु गरज गरज घन घोर राग अमर अंबर में तुझको राग अमर अंबर में भर तुझको झूम झूम मृदु गरज गरज घन घोर राग अमर अंबर में भर दीज राग अमर अंबर में भर दीज झूम झूम मृदु गरज गरज घन घोर झर 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 नीर झर गिरी सिर में झर 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 नीर झर गिरी सिर में साग पगवरी साग पगवरी झर 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 नीर झर गिरी सिर में झर 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 नीर झर गिरी सिर में साग पगवरी साग पगवरी धर मरुवर मर सागर धर मरुवर मर सागर सरित ताड़ित गति चकित पवन सरित ताड़ित गति चकित पवन सरि सदनि पदनि पगमनि सरि सबरि पप मपनि दनि दिस मन में घटन कानन में मन में घटन कानन में आनन आनन में घोर कठोर आनन आनन में घोर कठोर राग अंबर में भर निज राग अमर अंबर में भर निज झूम झूम मृदु गरज गरज घन घोर झूम झूम मृदु गरज गरज घन घोर हरे वर्ष के हर्ष बरस तू बरस बरस रसधार हरे वर्ष के हर्ष बरस तू बरस बरस रसधार चल तू मुझको बट दिखा मुझको भी पार चल तू मुझको बट दिखा मुझको भी निज गर्जन गौरव संसार निज गर्जन गौरव संसार उथल पुथल भर हृदय मचा हलचल उथल पुथल भर हृदय मचा हलचल चल 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 मेरे पागल बादल चल चल मेरे पागल बादल चल मेरे पागल बादल झूम झूम मृदु गरज गरज घन घोर झूम झूम मृदु गरज गरज घन घोर झूम झूम में कर इस भरोर से इसी शोर से इस भरोर से इसी शोर से सघन घोर गुरु गहन रोर से सघन घोर गुरु गहन रोर से मुझे गगन का दिखा सघन बचा मुझे गगन का दिखा सघन बचा सा सनि दरि पम प प ग म रि सा सनि पम मनि दरि सनि पम मनि दरि मरि पम नि दरि नि धूम झूम मृदु गरज घर गो झूम मृदु गरज घन गो रागमय अंबर में हर निज रागमय अंबर में हर निज झूम झूम मृदु झूम झूम मृदु गरज गरज घन गो गरज
आज की अंतिम प्रस्तुति है तिल्लाना। तिल्लाना भरतनाट्यम नृत्य पद्धति के मार्गम प्रस्तुति क्रम का अंतिम अंग है। यह पूर्णतः ताल प्रधान अंग है। इसमें अंग संचालन एवं सुंदर सुंदर भाव भंगिमाएं होती हैं। प्रस्तुत है तिल्लाना।
दीम तदर तन तेरे नारे यारे गारे दुदर 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 दीम तदर तन तन तेरे नारे यारे नारे यारे गारे दुदर दीप तदर दीप तदर तन तेरे नारे यारे गारे दुदर दीप तदर तन तेरे नारे यारे हारे 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 दुदर दीप तदर धीरे खतजम लतजम धीनु ततन दिमि दिमि ताखतजम धीरे खतजम लतजम धीनु ततन दिमि दिमि ताखतजम तागिड दरिगिड दिमि दरिगिड तगद दिमि दगिड तगद दिन तद्दित्तनांगु तगदम तगदित्तनांगु तगदम तगदिगुदनांगु तगदम दुदर दीप तदर तन तेरे नारे यारे हारे 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 दुदर दीप तदर శాస్త్రమును ప్రబల పరచుటకే కళాక్షేత్రమును ఈ వసుధలో భరత శాస్త్రమును ప్రబల పరచుటకే కళాక్షేత్రమును వేగమే పూనికతో స్థాపించి పాలించు రూపిణీ దేవి వేగమే పూర్ణికతో స్థాపించి పాలించు రూపిణీ దేవి నీ వంటి కారుణ్యశీలురా ఎవరు లేరను సుమదిలో నదలచియే పగలనైన నా వ్యథ తీర్చి మానము కాపాడుదువని వచ్చితి సాస నిదద నిదద పప గమ పప పద నిద గమ పద ని సా నిద పమ గమ ద పమ గరి స ని సా ని గరి మగరి సరి గమ పమ ప మగరి గమ పద మమ పద ని మ పద ని పద ని ద ని స ని ద పద ని ని స ద ని ద గరి గమ గరి స స ని గరి స ని ద స ని ద పమ గమ పద ని ధీ రే హతజం ధీన తిలతజం ధీను తత దిమి దిమి తాగతజం తాగిట దరిగిట దిమి దరిగిట దగద దిమి దగిట దగ దగ దిన తద్దిత్తనాంగు దగదం తగదిత్తనాంగు దగదం తగదిగు తణాంగు తగదం కుదరది తదరది తదర తన తేరే నారే యారే హారే కుదరది తదరది తదర తన తేరే నారే యారే హారే కుదరది తదరది తదర తన తేరే నారే యారే హారే తేరే నారే యారే హారే తేరే నారే యారే హారే
संपूर्ण प्रस्तुतियों की संकल्पना, संरचना, संयोजन एवं निर्देशन गुरु डॉक्टर लता सिंह मुंशी। नृत्यांगनाएं सुश्री रिया शर्मा, सुश्री रुचि सक्सेना, सुश्री सुमन कोठारी, सुश्री प्रियंका शर्मा एवं सुश्री अपूर्वा व्यास।
Check. Check, check. चेक चेक। अद्भुत। एक बार चाहूंगा लता मुंशी जी और उनके स्टूडेंट्स के लिए एक और बार जोरदार तालियां होना चाहिए। क्या बेहतरीन कला का प्रदर्शन था, मन कर रहा था बस देखते रहें और देखते ही रहें। बढ़िया। चलिए अब इस वैलेडिक्टरी सेरेमनी को आगे बढ़ाते हैं और अब मंच पे उन चुनिंदा पर्सनालिटीज़ को बुलाते हैं जिनकी वजह से भोपाल लिटरेचर एंड आर्ट फेस्टिवल में चार चांद लगे। मैं मंच पे बड़े ही आदर के साथ बुलाना चाहूँगा श्री अनिरुद्ध सूरी जी को, श्री तुहीन सिन्हा जी को, मीरा दास जी को, अभिलाष खांडेकर जी को, राघव चंद्र जी को और डीके मेहता जी को। मैं चाहूँगा तालियों से हम इन सभी का स्वागत करें इस मंच पे। I would request the dignitaries to please have a seat. Yes, sir. Please. Anirudh Suri ji. Tuhin Sinha ji. I hope he's here with us. Okay. He has left. Meera Das ji. Abhilash Khandikar ji. If they are not here volunteers, please get to them. Raghav Chandra ji is here and Mehta ji is here. So 3 days, 95 guests, 95 thinkers and 50 sessions. मैं प्रेम शंकर शुक्ला जी को भी आमंत्रित करना चाहूँगा मंच पे, अगर वो हमारे बीच मौजूद हैं। मैं निवेदन करना चाहूँगा लता सिंह मुंशी जी से और उनके जितने भी विद्यार्थी हैं कि वो एक बार मंच पे आए और हम उन्हें सम्मानित करना चाहेंगे भोपाल लिटरेचर एंड आर्ट फेस्टिवल की तरफ से एक अद्भुत पेशकश के लिए जिसने हम सभी का दिल मोह लिया। सो मैं चाहूँगा प्लीज कॉल Abhilash Khandekar ji is here with us. I would request one of the volunteers to please reach out to Meera Das ji for being here. Dr. Prasad ji, if he's here, Dr. Prasad, please, I would love to invite you to the dais. Please, taaliyan honi chahiye everyone. एंड लता मुंशी जी हमारे बीच मौजूद है, जोरदार तालियों से हम उनका स्वागत करेंगे। एंड मैं चाहूँगा जो उनके स्टूडेंट्स हैं वो भी हमारे बीच आए और मैं चाहूँगा सभी स्टूडेंट्स आए। एंड यस, शुक्ला जी भी हमारे बीच मौजूद है, मैं उनको भी मंच पर बुलाना चाहूँगा। यस, जी हाँ, लता मुंशी जी और उनके विद्यार्थी हमारे बीच आ चुके हैं। और मुझे लगता है जब हम उनका सम्मान कर रहे हैं, अपना आभार प्रकट कर रहे हैं, तो हमें तालियों में कमी नहीं रखनी चाहिए। एक ऐसा अद्भुत परफॉर्मेंस जो कम ही देखने मिलता है। हमारा कल्चर, हमारा ट्रेडिशन, उसको बखूबी से दर्शाया अपनी कला के द्वारा। There you go. There it is, the memento, the mascot of the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival. This picture, ladies and gentlemen, is of a highly endangered bird called Lesser Florican, captured by Padma Shri Bhalu Mondi ji, who has been there with us since the day one, and जिनका exhibition भी आपने साथ में देखा, बेहतरीन तस्वीरें आती हैं, and there it is, the mascot of the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival. And एक बार फिर से तालियों से आभार प्रकट करना चाहेंगे लता सिंह मुंशी जी का एक अद्भुत पेशकश के लिए। एंड उन्हीं के साथ साथ जितने भी स्टूडेंट्स थे, I think all of them were equally amazing, equally mesmerizing. All of us were, transferred into a different world while watching them perform at this historic stage of Bharat Bhavan. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आप सभी का। इससे बेहतर वैलेडिक्टरी परफॉर्मेंस हम एक्सपेक्ट कर नहीं सकते थे, और हमारा सौभाग्य है कि इतनी खूबसूरत पेशकश हम सब देख पाए हैं। नाउ आई वुड लाइक टू इनवाइट टू द पोडियम द डायरेक्टर ऑफ भोपाल लिटरेचर एंड आर्ट फेस्टिवल, राघव चंद्रा जी, टू थ्रो लाइट ऑन वन सिग्निफिकेंट अवार्ड दैट वी आर गोइंग टू गिव अवे हेयर। The award goes by the title सुशीला देवी सम्मान, और मैं चाहूँगा कि राघव जी यहाँ पे आएँ और हमें उस अवार्ड के बारे में बताएं, एंड हम तालियों से उनका स्वागत करेंगे।
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, देवियों सज्जनों, जब हमने 2019 में ये भोपाल लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल प्रारंभ किया, तब हमने रतनलाल फाउंडेशन से रिक्वेस्ट की और उन्होंने सुशीला देवी अवार्ड हमारे कहने पर इंस्टीट्यूट किया फॉर द बेस्ट वर्क ऑफ फिक्शन डन इन अ पर्टिकुलर ईयर बाय अ वुमन ऑथर। और उसमें बहुत ही सम्मानित ऑथर्स को सबको कहा गया कि उनकी प्रस्तुतियों का परीक्षण किया जाए। हमने जूरी अपॉइंट की जिसमें डॉक्टर मालश्री लाल, जो एक प्रोफेसर दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी की हैं, लेखक हैं, उनको उसका अध्यक्ष बनाया। उसकी सेकंड मेंबर ऑफ द जूरी डॉक्टर सुकृता पॉल कुमार हैं, वो भी डिस्टिंग्विश्ड पोएट और राइटर हैं इंग्लिश लिटरेचर की। और थर्ड जूरी मेंबर मुझे कहते हुए खुशी है कि यहाँ पर उपस्थित हैं डॉक्टर जी.जे.वी. प्रसाद, JNU यूनिवर्सिटी के प्रोफेसर ऑफ इंग्लिश लिटरेचर। अभी तक उस अवार्ड को नमिता गोखले जी जीत चुकी हैं, और भी अनुकृति उपाध्याय जीत चुकी हैं, और ये चौथा अवार्ड है जो आज अनुराधा रॉय जी को मिल रहा है। एंड वी आर वेरी हैप्पी टू से दैट शी हैज़ डन सम रिमार्केबल राइटिंग, एंड दिस इज़ एन अवार्ड विच कैरीज अ प्राइज ऑफ 2 लाख रुपीज़ एंड अ साइटेशन। आई विल रिक्वेस्ट अनुराधा रॉय जी, बिफोर शी कम्स, for Dr. G.J.V. Prasad to please come here and read the citation. This is it, so that you remember what you've written.
I was going to.
Will you be able to read it this way? I'll hold it.
Don't worry. You're right.
Go ahead.
The Sushila Devi Award.
And in fact, we can call Anuradha. Anuradha, can we call you over, please?
Yes.
आपको पढ़ने में दिक्कत
हो रही है, मैं इससे कर लेता हूँ।
इससे पढ़ लें।
because the plaque is as shining as the writing in the book, and as shiny as that, so I'm reflecting the light is reflecting mine. So I'm going to read from my phone. Impressive in its range, Anuradha Roy's sophisticated novel, The Earth Spinner, glides effortlessly over mythology, history, caste, and caste politics, religious politics, and everyday realism. A potter imagines shaping a terracotta horse that breathes the elements of fire and water, but he also has to contend with the travails of forbidden love. Right. Roy's lyricism rises above the mundane to ask larger questions about the meaning of human existence. Breaking past several genres of writing, the author's inspired language has malleability as well as firmness, aesthetic form as well as an endearing fragility. With superb imagination and impeccable craft, Anuradha Roy achieves a beautiful balance in a novel that explores the mystique of creation. I read the citation on behalf of all the members of jury.
And we request her to come on the dais now to receive the prize.
I must say, on my own behalf, that this was a brilliant novel, wonderful read, and everybody must buy a copy and read it. Come on.
There you go. There it is, the Sushila Devi Samman. Yes, please. Please, please.
Thank you so much for waiting patiently for all of this. I mean, it's the end of the festival. All of you have seen so much and heard so much that is wonderful here. And I've just been feeling so so hopeful that individual initiative can bring all this art, thought, culture, new ideas to a city. I mean, it's not as though a government has done something. It is people who thought that this could be done, and it's even this award, the thinking behind it is to really probably, people can question what do prizes do for writing. People can even ask, why do you need a special prize for women's fiction in this day and age? But if you look at the statistics, not just in India, but even in the Western world, women's writing still continues to be the much lesser reviewed and awarded much less than men's writing. People are urged on and on to not be gender biased in the way they read, but somehow when people do read, it is mostly writers like the Pakistani writer Kamila Shamsi, who is now British, of course, but she has done quite a few very strong articles studying why this happens, that women's writing is somehow thought to be less. So, of course, you would like women to be winning prizes on all forums equally. But meanwhile, I'm very glad that you thought of a prize that looks at women's writing and seeks to award the best in it, because perhaps in other prizes, sad to say, women still don't stand exactly an equal chance of winning them. So I'm grateful and honored that I've won this prize, which has been won by extremely good writers before me. I hope the prize and the festival go on and on from strength to strength every year. And I'm very grateful to my publishers who have always believed in me as a writer, and my family, of course, without whom no writer can succeed. And my dogs, who always try to stop me being a writer, but I persevere nevertheless, however much they try to distract me. Thank you all for this.
थैंक यू सो मच अनुराधा रॉय जी. एक और बार ताली होनी चाहिए उनके लिए. यस श्योर. अनुराधा जी को सुनते हुए मन कर रहा था कि बस सुनते रहे उनको. काफ़ी सारे लेखक यहाँ पे हैं, काफ़ी सारे राइटर्स, पोइट्स जो हिंदी इंग्लिश दोनों भाषाओं में लिखते हैं. उनके पेरेंट्स भी हमारे बीच मौजूद हैं, उनका भी मैं स्वागत करता हूँ, अभिनंदन करता हूँ. और अब वो घड़ी आ गई है जिसका ये जो पोइट्स हैं ये इंतज़ार कर रहे थे खासकर. सो एक बहुत ही बेहतरीन कॉम्पिटिशन ऑर्गेनाइज करवाया गया था, पोइट्री कॉम्पिटिशन इन हिंदी एंड इंग्लिश लैंग्वेजेस. मुझे पता है दिन भर से इंतजार कर रहे हैं, पता है मुझे. तो अब वो फाइनली पल आ गया है. ऑल द डिग्निटरीज हमारे बीच मौजूद हैं और उनके हाथों अवार्ड्स दिए जाएंगे. और इस कंपटीशन के बारे में अधिक बताने के लिए मैं मंच पे बुलाना चाहूँगा द मार्केटिंग डायरेक्टर ऑफ मंजिल पब्लिशिंग हाउस, द एलुमनस ऑफ IIM Ahmedabad and a wonderful speaker, trainer, soft skills trainer and an amazing personality, one that inspires youngsters of Bhopal, the one and only राजीव जी. जोरदार ताली से उनका स्वागत करेंगे.
गुड इवनिंग, नमस्कार, आदाब, सत श्री अकाल भोपाल. ये वो मोमेंट है जिसके लिए हम बहुत दिनों से मेहनत कर रहे हैं. और मैं अभी ये कहूँगा कि ये BLF की अंगूठी में हीरा है. तो सब मैं ठीक कह रहा हूँ, अतिशयोक्ति नहीं होगी. वो हीरा इसलिए है, मैं आपको बताता हूँ कि इस शहर को जोड़ने के लिए एक कोशिश थी कि कैसे जोड़ा जाए कि BLF वन वे ट्रैफिक नहीं रहे, इट्स अ टू वे ट्रैफिक. वी इन्वॉल्व पीपल हियर. और कैसे इन्वॉल्व करें कि इस शहर के यंगस्टर्स को इन्वॉल्व करना था, इस शहर के यूथ को इन्वॉल्व करना था. तो काफ़ी सोच समझ के राघव सर के डायरेक्शन में हमने एक आइडिया निकाला कि इस शहर के स्कूल और कॉलेज के बच्चों को इस तरह से जोड़ा जाए कि वो लिटरेरी चीज़ें पढ़ें और उस पर लिखें भी. बिकॉज ऐसा हमारा मानना है कि जब आप पढ़ेंगे तभी आप लिख पाएंगे. तो हमने एक पोइट्री कॉन्टेस्ट ईजाद की हुई है जो हम पिछले कुछ सालों से चला रहे हैं. This is divided into two categories. There is a school category, which is from class 9 to 12, and there is a college category for undergraduate and postgraduate students. It's very simple. The idea is to promote literature in a way that it connects to youngsters. And these are the two categories we defined. दो simple languages हैं, हिंदी और English. और हर साल हम कुछ 3 नए tropical subjects ले लेते हैं जो उस वक्त relevant होते हैं, और एक imaginative subject टॉपिक ज़रूर लेते हैं कि जिससे थोड़ा इमेजिनेशन को पुश किया जाए. इस पूरे 2023 के फेस्टिवल में इमेजिनेशन वर्ड बहुत यूज़ हुआ है और हमारी ये कोशिश रही है कि ये बच्चों तक भी पहुँचे उनकी अपनी टैलेंट निखारने में. तो दिस इज़ द टाइम दैट वी स्टार्ट गिविंग द अवार्ड्स फॉर द पोइट्री कॉन्टेस्ट वेयर वी गॉट मोर देन 300 एंट्रीज. When we kind of decide on the categories and everything, it boils down to some 36 awards. इस बार इतनी सारी एंट्रीज आई और खासकर माँ के ऊपर इतनी एंट्रीज आई कि हमने सोचा कि कुछ और बच्चे जो बहुत अमेजिंग पोइट्रीज थी. सो द अवार्ड्स आर एक्चुअली 38 दिस ईयर. सो kudos to the children of Bhopal for doing amazing job, for the student of Bhopal for participating here. आपको बहुत मजेदार चीज बताता हूँ कि 3 स्टूडेंट्स ऐसे हैं जिन्होंने पिछले साल भी अवार्ड जीता था. दे हैव अगेन वन द अवार्ड दिस ईयर. सो बिग हैंड फॉर देम दैट देयर नेम्स विल कम अप. एक लड़का है, मैं उसका नाम अभी से बता देता हूँ, ही इज अ विनर एनी विच वे, आशुतोष त्रिपाठी. उसने 3 कैटेगरी में पोइट्री लिखी और तीनों कैटेगरी में उसकी पोइट्री सिलेक्ट हुई विनिंग के लिए. अनफॉर्चुनेटली हम एक एंट्री में एक ही अवार्ड देते हैं तो उसको नहीं मिल पाई. बट आशुतोष, गुड जॉब डन फॉर यू. बिग हैंड फॉर आशुतोष. ये सारा काम हम खुद नहीं कर सकते, अकेले नहीं कर सकते, तो उसके लिए बहुत डिस्टिंग्विश्ड जूरी होती है जो हम हर साल बदल देते हैं. एवरी ईयर वी हैव अ न्यू जूरी. सो लेट मी इनवाइट फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल द फर्स्ट जूरी, एंड लेट्स ऑनर हर हियर एट दिस स्टेज. Dr. Rekha Kastawar, can we please have you onto the stage? डॉक्टर रेखा कस्तवार हिंदी की जूरी हैं, सरोजनी नायडू महाविद्यालय स्नातक कला संकाय से हैं, गोल्ड मेडल के साथ हमीदिया महाविद्यालय से परास्नातक, बरकतुल्लाह विश्वविद्यालय से स्त्री अध्ययन पर पीएचडी, 38 इयर्स का उच्च शिक्षा विभाग में अध्यापन कार्य का अनुभव, सरोजनी नायडू महाविद्यालय में विभाग अध्यक्ष, हिंदी स्त्री विमर्श की अध्येता, कथाकार, समीक्षक, प्रतिष्ठित राष्ट्रीय स्तर के समाचार पत्र में लगातार 5 वर्ष तक कॉलम, लेखन, पुस्तक, स्त्री चिंतन की चुनौतियां और बहुत सारी किताबें इन्होंने लिखी हैं। ये लिस्ट खत्म नहीं हो रही है। तो दिस इज फॉर डॉक्टर रेखा कस्तवार। प्लीज कंजूसी मत करिए यार, अपनी एचओडी के लिए तालियां बजा लीजिए। May I invite the amazing, she's been the one who's the most stressed actually because, her son was not well and, there were commitments there. Dr. Noin Khalik, the English jury for BLF Manjul 2023 Poetry Contest. Big hand for Dr. Noin Khalik, please. She is an associate professor in UIT, the University of Teaching Department of RGPV, which is the Technical University of Madhya Pradesh. She is an executive member of the Board of Studies of Humanities Department of RGPV. Her long stint in electronic media during her undergraduate days when she worked as a scriptwriter and newsreader in Doordarshan and All India Radio. So guys, big hand once more for Dr. Noin Khalik. इनको आज अभी तक रोकने के लिए मुझे इनके हस्बैंड को भी मनाना पड़ा है, तो प्लीज इनके हस्बैंड के लिए थोड़ी सी तालियां बजा दीजिए। And without much ado, I'll start taking the names of the winners. We don't tell the grades here who's won first, second or third. These are all winners here. So please don't stop clapping for them. So let me start with the Hindi category. Let me start with the Hindi category for school class 9 to 12. And kids come fast, one by one, quickly as I take the names. Akshat Malviya for Samay Yatra. Akshat Malviya, can we have you onto the stage, please, quickly? After Akshat, we have Karthik Singh Thakur. So Akshat first, Karthik after that. Ji. Akshat, please. Akshat Malviya, Karthik Singh Thakur. Sheetal, can we have you here? Sheetal has won the award last year also. इसकी फोटो बाहर भी लगी हुई है। We have Lok Ranjan Dubey. Can we have Lok Ranjan Dubey here, please? We have Vedanshi Vijayavargiya. Please see your names on the certificates when you receive them. You've got them right. Sheetal Rajput, Lok Ranjan Dubey, Vedanshi Vijayavargiya, Tanisha Athale, Parnam Bharel. Please keep checking your names on the certificates. Tanisha Athale, Parnam Bharel. I am moving to the college students. And college students have really surprised me that they have written about both the other subjects. और वो माँ को भूल गए आगे, माँ के ऊपर लिखा ही नहीं उन्होंने अनफॉर्चुनेटली। कॉलेज में आके शायद बच्चे माँ भूल जाते हैं, स्कूल तक याद रहती है माँ उन लोगों को। College students में I start with Prayag Dubey. Prayag Dubey is here. Prayag Dubey, please come. Pushpendra Bansal, can we have you here? Aditi Sharma, can we have you here? Aditi, after Pushpendra. Can we have Devdarshan Sahu? Please तालियां बजाते रहिए यार, बच्चों की सीक्वेंस चालू है। So Pushpendra Bansal, Aditi Sharma, Devdarshan Sahu, we have Mahi Singh Rawat. Mahi, can we have you here? Madiha Hafiz, can we have you here? Swarna Tiwari, can we have you here? इनमें से ज्यादातर बच्चों ने अमेजिंग चीजें, जितनी अच्छी कविता लिखी थी उतनी ही अच्छी सुनाई थी. हमारा इस पूरे लाइव परफॉर्मेंस का कोशिश ये रहता है कि उनको बोलने का भी मौका दें. हम अक्सर लिखते अच्छा है तो बोल नहीं पाते, पर हम उनको ये बोलने का भी मौका देते हैं कि आके अपनी कविता खुद सुनाइए. क्रिएट दैट कॉन्फिडेंस ऑन द कम्युनिकेशन स्किल. एंड देन आई हैव आशुतोष त्रिपाठी, जिसने 3 कैटेगरीज में लिखा था. तीनों में इसकी प्राइज के लिए सिलेक्ट हुई, बट ही कुड विन ओनली ऑन वन. So this is Ashutosh Tripathi. Can we move on to? I move on to the English category. ये हिंदी का था. The English category, I'll start with school class 9 to 12, जिसमें हम usually तो 9 पुरस्कार देते हैं, पर इस बार 14 पुरस्कार दिए हैं. स्कूल के बच्चों ने माँ और होप पे खूब सारी कविताएं लिखी थी. So let me start with Shivangi Gogia. Can we have Rajvi Sharma after this, after Shivangi? Please yaar, ताली बजाते रहो. Please ताली बजाते रहो. For these kids. You know, this is a rush hour. Don't stop clapping. After Rajvi, can we have Samia Hamid? So दोस्तों, Samiha Hamid represents St. Joseph's Convent, and St. Joseph Convent has won 7 awards, 7 prizes. So big hand for St. Joseph's Convent. Can we have Rida Rehan? Can we have Athar Tiwari? So all these red coats are St. Joseph Convent. Can we have Hana Asaf Khan? Can we have Soumya Singh? All the red coats are St. Joseph Convent, guys. 7 awards. So big hand for that teacher. Ekta Sareen, ma'am. Good show. Can we have Krishan Kumar Dhanna? Can we have Shlok Mehta? So guys, Kriten and Shlok are the 2 boys again who have won the award last year also. Please तालियां बजा लीजिए. Shlok Mehta. Can we have Anushri Rajput? Can we have Anushri Rajput, please? Can we have Riddhi Saxena? Sorry.
Shlok Mehta is the son of Colonel V.S. Mehta, who is in Kashmir, who is an officer from my unit 19 Kumaon. And last year also, this boy had won the prize, and I only come to know now, right now. I've kept myself away. Congratulations, Shlok.
संजय सर बेसिकली कह रहे हैं कि हम कितने ईमानदार हैं और हम ना बताते नहीं, लीक ही नहीं करते इन्फॉर्मेशन कहीं पे भी, इंटरनली भी नहीं करते. संजय सर, थैंक यू, वी लव यू. So for Riddhi Saxena, we'll have Ekta Sareen, ma'am, for on behalf of her, and she is special because 7 of our students have won for St. Joseph's Convent. Big hand for Ekta Sareen, ma'am. Kanak Priya Sharma, Manya Sethi, can I call Devinder Kaur ma'am to take her award, please? So Manya Sethi's award is being taken by her teacher for Gandhinagar SPS. I'm moving to college students in the English category. Can we have Nilav Bhattacharjee, please? Nilav, can we have you? Nilav, quickly. Can we have Hafsa Khan, please? After Nilav, can we have Hafsa? After Hafsa, can we have Atri Garg, please? Atri has got a train to catch. And as soon as this gets over, I want all the winners to come on the certificates and have a group photograph, please, quickly. All the winners. Within 2 minutes, you could be here. You should be here. After Atri, can we have Sakshi Sharma, please? And can we have Karen Ashna? And all the... Sakshi Sharma, Karen Ashna. Can we have all the school students, all the winners quickly onto the stage here? All of you. Quickly sit here. For the group photograph, please come here. Everyone, all the winning students, please come here and sit here. Sit here, sit here, sit here. Okay, Niharika and Arpita have just joined in. So can I call Niharika and Arpita, please? Where is Niharika? Arpita? नहीं आई यार. अच्छा, okay, we'll give it to you. Arpita, join with the group right now. Just join with the group. Niharika has not come. Arpita is here, sir. We'll give the award after this. She can take a group photograph. So, ma'am, I'll give you the award. Don't worry. Please come. You deserve it more. So, thank you everyone for the group photograph. Thank you everyone. Arpita, you stay. Arpita's award is here. Please, Arpita की photo ले लीजिए, please. Photographers, please. Arpita की photo. जी मैम, रुक जाइए. For Niharika, her mom is here. And thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Bhopal. So, big hand for children once again. Thank you. I hand over to Siddharth.
Everyone, please be settled. This is not the end. मैं संजय अग्रवाल जी को, ब्रिगेडियर संजय अग्रवाल जी को यहाँ मंच पे बुलाना चाहूँगा for proposing the vote of thanks to the audiences and the members, attendees of the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival and everyone who has been a part. और प्लीज़ बैठे रहिए, मैं चाहूँगा जब हम सब साथ में रवाना होंगे. Please be seated.
So, ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly what is called flexibility and surprise. So, here I am to deliver the vote of thanks. And the biggest thanks needs to go to you guys from Bhopal. It is you who make this successful by attending, by motivating us. And of course, they also serve who stand and wait. And therefore, behind these faces that you see, and behind us who walk from here to there with a scowl on our face sometimes, there are many, many agencies, people, departments, NGOs, teams, and I don't think I would remember all of them, but let me start with the MP state government itself. We started off as an NGO ourselves, and with the success of the first edition in 2019, it was very nice to have the support thereafter of the MP state government and the tourism department and all the facilities that are made available to us. So we thank the MP state government and the tourism department and all of their people for their time, effort, goodwill, etc. We also thank a whole lot of educational institutions. We have not only a strong backbone of seasoned volunteers who literally have been on their feet throughout the whole day. Tired in their faces, eyes are tired, but there's a smile on their face. Hats off to these young boys and girls. And then, of course, we have the staff of Bharat Bhavan. It's well beyond office hours. And it's 3 days what you see. But we've been working here for 2 days before that. Unstinting help. जो भारत भवन के स्टाफ के लोगों ने हमारी इमदाद दी है, हमें मदद दी है, हमें संग सहयोग दिया है, उसके लिए हम उनको सोसाइटी फॉर कल्चर एंड एनवायरनमेंट की तरफ से और भोपाल लिट फेस्ट के ऑर्गेनाइजर्स की तरफ से तहे दिल से धन्यवाद देते हैं. इंडिविजुअल तौर पे यहाँ पर कई लोग ऐसे हैं जो शायद कमर्शियली काम कर रहे हैं हमारे संग, लेकिन उनकी कर्तव्य परायणता देखकर मैंने बोला ये भी कर दो. एक शिकन नहीं है चेहरे पे, कर देंगे. 1:30 बजे रात को मैंने बोला ये नहीं हुआ है अभी करो. सर करता हूं. मना कर सकता था, सो रहा था वो आदमी, लेकिन किया है. और वो शख्स इस समय इस हॉल में है, वो जानता है मैं क्या बोल रहा हूं. किसी को फोटो चाहिए, लिंक डाल रखे हैं, नहीं देखे उन्होंने, फोटो मांग रहे हैं. तो ये जो टीम पीछे काम कर रही है, इस टीम को मेरा सलाम और हम सब का सलाम. जो फेसबुक और यूट्यूब पे लाइव स्ट्रीमिंग की है और यथाशीघ्र फोटो डाली हैं, किसी ने तो डाली है, कोई टीम काम कर रही है. जो ये फोटोग्राफर्स हैं ये काम कर रहे हैं. So there are a lot of volunteers, a lot of people. I'm sure anybody that time. हाँ. Yes. 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 शुक्ला साहब को आइए. So आप ये and remember this festival is Siddharth. Siddharth came to us as a novice 5 years ago, and he is friends with me on Facebook. So I've seen his metamorphosis into a professional anchor. Best wishes for a bright career. शुक्ला जी से जब मेरी मुलाकात हुई, कल मैंने बोला गमले लगा दो, कहते हैं सर अभी, और खुद खड़े होकर लगवाएं. आइए चंद शब्दों से सबको संबोधित कीजिए.
सबसे पहले तो ये जो भारत भवन में 3 दिन बहुत खूबसूरत मेला रहा, बल्कि रचनात्मक मेला रहा. एक बहुत क्रिएटिव ढंग से हम सब लोग इकट्ठा थे. मैं सचमुच में कोई औपचारिकता नहीं है, मैं राघव चंद्रा साहब का आभार और कृतज्ञता दोनों मानता हूँ. और भोपाल के लिए बहुत बड़ी चीज़ है जो काम कर रहे हैं. ऐसा इसलिए कि बहुत सारे लोग होते हैं, हमारे ऑफिसर्स होते हैं, सब इस तरह से क्रिएटिव काम और इतना कलेक्टिव, इतने लोगों को जोड़ना ये बड़े पुरुषार्थ की मांग करता है जो उनने किया है. और भारत भवन को उनने एक जगह के रूप में, और भारत भवन एक क्रिएटिव स्पेस है, तो उसके उस क्रिएटिव स्पेस को बहुत रचनात्मक ढंग से उसका उनने प्रयोग किया, उपयोग किया, यहाँ सबको अवसर दिया। और हमको भी अवसर ही मैं मानता हूँ कि हम सबको मिला, आप सबको देखने का, सुनने का, समझने का। बहुत सारे डिसिप्लिन के लेक्चर्स हुए, बातचीत हुई, हमने सुना, हम भी उससे प्रतिकृत भी हुए और सचमुच में वो एक तरह का नॉलेज बैंक जैसा यहाँ मैंने 3 दिन देखा कि आप बहुत सारा उससे अपने काम का प्राप्त कर सकते हैं। बहुत पहले ऐसे कविता लिखते हुए अभी बहुत कवियों को सम्मानित किया गया, तो लिखा था कि भोपाल कविता का शहर है, यहाँ गली गली कविता बनती है और टांगों पर दौड़ते रहते हैं किस्से। तो सचमुच में पता नहीं क्या इन हमारे युवाओं और युवतर ने बहुत सुंदर किया। पूरे आयोजन के परिकल्पना ही इतनी सुंदर है कि मैं क्या बताऊं। बहुत सारे लोग, हम लोग थोड़ा हिंदी वाले, सचमुच में थोड़ा दिल बड़ा करने की ज़रूरत होती है संस्थानों को भी, इसलिए कि आप जब अपना बंद कर लेंगे, ये ऐसी जगह है जिस डायस पर मैं खड़ा हूँ तो सचमुच में मेरा पाँव ये सोच के कांपता है कि इसी डायस पर पंडित भीमसेन जोशी, इसी डायस पर पंडित जसराज, इसी डायस पर किशोरी मोनकर और 4 ऐसे कवि दुनिया के जिनको बाद में नोबेल प्राइज़ मिला, वो इसी डायस में उनने अपनी कविता पढ़ी थी। और ये सब लोग हैं, और जिस तरह से चंद्रा साहब ने, उनकी पूरी टीम ने, देवेंद्र भैया से बहुत पहले से परिचित हूँ, अभिलाष जी, ये सब पूरी टीम जो है, मीरा राव जी हैं, सुलक्षणा जी हैं, इन सब से यद्यपि हम लोग थोड़ा गुमान करते हैं कि भारत भवन को आयोजन करने की बहुत तमीज़ है, पर मैं ईमानदारी से चीज़ कह रहा हूँ कि हमें बहुत कुछ सीखने, समझने का और अर्जित करने का अवसर मिला इससे। और मैं चंद्रा साहब का, भोपाल लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल का इसके लिए शुक्रगुजार, कृतज्ञता प्रकट करता हूँ। और ये चीज़ें और बढ़ें, आगे जाएं, मैं इसकी शुभकामना भी देता हूँ। उनको 100 साल से ऊपर उम्र मिले उनको, चूँकि बहुत सारा ऐसा काम उनने किया है कि हमारे मध्य प्रदेश में नहीं हुआ था। हमको ये बहुत ईमानदारी से मानना चाहिए। ऐसा नहीं, एक आयोजन में न सबको अवसर मिल सकता है। हम तो रोज़, हमारे आप पीठ की खुदाई करिए तो कई किलो गालियाँ निकलेंगी। तो ये तो चलता है, लेकिन सच्चे अर्थों में जो उनने काम किया है, जो उनकी टीम ने किया है, जो युवाओं को जोड़ रहे हैं, देखिए मैं तो बहुत भाग्यशाली मानता हूँ इनको। हम लोग स्कूल में कुछ निबंध लिख के या ऐसे डायस पर बोल के एक सर्टिफिकेट मिल जाता था, तो उसको वर्षों, शायद अभी भी थोड़ा बहुत जो दीमकों से बच पाया होगा घर में रखा होगा। और उन दिनों की याद आती है कि एक कविता की 4 लाइन हमारी मान लिया, किसी ने सुन लिया, हमारे टीचर ने उसको प्रोत्साहित कर दिया, और एक पूरा वातावरण बना के ऐसे करना, जिसमें आप सोचिए कितना सुंदर आयोजन है कि जहाँ एक 9-10 साल की बच्ची भी अपनी कविता प्रस्तुत कर सकती है, और वहाँ जिनने अपने जीवन का, अपने डिसिप्लिन में बहुत सारा पूरा जीवन ही लगाया है। अभी जैसे विवेक देव ओबेराय जी को सुन रहा था, उनने पूरा जीवन लगाया है। जैसे तो एक तरफ वो हैं और एक तरफ देखिए 10 साल की बच्ची या बच्चा भी है, अपनी क्रिएटिविटी को यहाँ ला रहा है। तो इस तरह से ये सर्जना का जो समुद्र या सागर उनने भोपाल में 3 दिन आलोड़ित किया, उमड़ा दिया है, इसके लिए मैं सच्चे अर्थों में कृतज्ञ हूँ। हमारा भारत भवन, हमारा संस्कृति विभाग सब कृतज्ञ है उनके प्रति। ऐसे आयोजन होते रहने चाहिए और इस तरह का उनका पुरुषार्थ आगे और बढ़े, यही मैं शुभकामना करता हूँ। आप सबके लिए ज़रूर है कि हम इतने बुरे नहीं हैं कि हम अपनी बुराई नहीं जानते हैं। तो हमारे में निश्चय ही कुछ कमी रह गई होगी, तो मैं उसके लिए क्षमा प्रार्थी हूँ। आप सब लोग इसी तरह भारत भवन को आत्मीयता दीजिए, चंद्रा साहब को शुभकामना दीजिए, भोपाल लिटरेचर फेस्टिवल को दीजिए, यह आगे 100 साल अपना मनाए, ये मैं शुभकामना देता हूँ। धन्यवाद प्रकट करता हूँ।
And the remainders, NID, anybody here? Do I thank them yesterday? They presented a program yesterday at the drop of a hat. And of course, when I said the BLF team, who is the event coordinator of the BLF team? There you are. Where are you? Would you please come forward so that people... There. That's the lady working day and night for months. Just a minute. इनके बारे में हाँ प्लीज बोलो ना।
दोस्तों ये जो अमेजिंग सी एक गॉर्जियस सी लड़कियां खड़ी है ना, इसका हमने नाम रखा है मिस एफिशिएंसी। हमारे यहाँ जो भी एफिशिएंट होता है ना, इसी की बदौलत होता है। सो बिग हैंड फॉर सुलक्षणा प्लीज।
एंड whilst we are on individuals, एक शख्स हैं जो अभी बोल के गए, क्या नाम है उनका? हाँ जरा जोर से। ये राजीव मिश्रा जो है ना, ही इज अ वन मैन आर्मी। काम दे दो, लक्ष्य अपने आप पूरा करेंगे। 7 समुंदर पार पहाड़ चल के आइए सामने। ये पोएट्री कंपटीशन राघव चंद्रा साहब के नेतृत्व और मार्गदर्शन में लोगों का सहयोग अपने आप लेते हुए मोटे तौर पर अकेले किया है। हमारे स्पॉन्सर्स सबके सामने लगे हुए हैं। आरजीपीवी ग्रुप है, दैनिक भास्कर है, मंजुल पब्लिशर्स हैं, बहुत सारे हैं। एक वर्ग और है जिसको राजीव ने पहले बोल दिया है, वो है हमारे जूरी और जजेस। आप सोचिए, उन्होंने इतनी किताबें पढ़ी होंगी क्रिटिकली और बोला होगा, इतनी कविताएं पढ़ी होंगी और उनको फिर किसको प्राइज मिले ये निर्णय लिया होगा। बगल वाला हॉल में जो नियंत्रण रख रहे थे, उस शख्स का नाम क्या है? मैंने लिंग जान के गड़बड़ किया है। रख रहे थे, एक्चुअली रख रही थी हैं। ये जोर से बोलो, नहीं सुनाई दिया। सो विनीता ढोंडियाल जी ने, कुछ भी हो जाए, दैट इज द एग्जाम्पल आई एम सेइंग, स्माइल। थकी भी लग रही हैं और हम कई बार कि ये क्यों ऐसा नहीं है, ये क्यों नहीं है, पानी क्यों नहीं है, हल्ला क्यों हो रहा है, ये एंकर, ये बच्चे ये क्यों नहीं कर रहे हैं, एंड शी डिलीवर्ड। सो हैट्स ऑफ टू हर एज वेल। एंड बियॉन्ड दिस, वन लास्ट स्मॉल नेम। दिस मॉर्निंग वी वेंट फॉर अ हेरिटेज वॉक and there was an archaeologist lady with us. The same lady was there last time. And incidentally, this lady is the pupil of Meera Das ji. And this lady, archaeologist's name is Pooja Saxena. And her knowledge of Bhopal's history, she's done a PhD on a related subject. She is what made this heritage walk come alive for us. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. All of you, Bhopal, you all rock.
हम चाहेंगे सुलक्षणा मैम भी हमारे साथ कुछ शब्द साझा करें।
सुलक्षणा बहुत कम बोलती है, पर संभाल के रहना।
Good evening, everyone. I would like to thank Mr. Chandra, under whose leadership and guidance, a continuous leadership and guidance, I work. So without his support, I would not be here. So he deserves the clapping as well. Mehta ji, who's been the strength of our team. He looks into all the, whatever you see in Bharat Bhavan, everything is, the food Mehta ji looks into, and without his energy and support, BLF is not possible. My team, my volunteers, Anuja, Amisha, under whose leadership, come over. And all my volunteers, please come here. Without you all, I would not be here. A photograph with you all, please. Come over.
Anuja has already started crying. She's so emotional. Yes.
Come. You'll have a picture.
Yes, there it is, the volunteers, the pillars of the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival, जिनके हाथ में सभी भागा दौड़ी का काम था। तो भागते दौड़ते गिरे भी कई बार, पर काम करके दिया। The hard working volunteers, I would also like to mention my co-anchors for Rang Darshini venue, Madiha and Devyani. Where are you? Yes, Madiha, and where is Devyani? उनके लिए भी जोरदार तालियां हो जाएं. Yes, Devyani, please come to the stage. A big thank you to the catering. Of course, उनके बिना हम भूखे रह जाते. So a big thank you to the catering services. Yes, Praveen Dubey ji और उनकी टीम. Yes, and the transporter as well. Meenakshi ji and Richa ji, जिन्होंने पूरा ट्रांसपोर्टेशन का मैनेजमेंट देखा और बखूबी उसको निभाया. संजय अग्रवाल जी, प्लीज आप भी आए मंच पे. Yes. Please come. Sanjay ji, please. Sanjeev ji. And the one and only Meeta Vadva ji. And just before everyone departs, मैं आपको बता दूं 2022 में जब BLF खत्म होता हमने एक शेर के साथ खत्म किया था. इस बार जब शुरू किया था तब चंद्रा जी ने एक शेर के साथ शुरू किया था. तो उस परंपरा को बरकरार रखते हुए एक शेर आप सभी की तारीफ में, और स्पेशली जो ऑडियंस हमारे साथ 3 दिनों से बनी हुई है, काफ़ी सारे लोग रोज़ाना आ रहे हैं, तो उनकी तारीफ में और सबकी तारीफ में एक शेर अर्ज करेंगे, उससे हम अंत करेंगे. अहमद फराज साहब का ये शेर है. नईम जी प्लीज़. यस, अहमद फराज साहब का ये शेर है कि अब जो हम बिछड़े तो शायद ख्वाबों में मिलेंगे, क्योंकि सब अलग होने वाले पर मिलते रहेंगे. अब जो हम बिछड़े तो शायद ख्वाबों में मिलेंगे, जिस तरह सूखे हुए फूल किताबों में मिलेंगे. सो उम्मीद है जितने भी एहसास, जितनी भी यादें हमने यहाँ समेटी है, जी हाँ, उनको हम समेट के ले जाएंगे. यस.
Hello, before we close, one last Thanksgiving which I forgot to mention is the Ministry of External Affairs और उनके representative यहाँ पर हैं राकेश तिवारी साहब को मैं बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद देता हूँ मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एक्सटर्नल अफेयर्स को जिन्होंने ये बिम्स्टेक का कार्यक्रम आयोजित किया है। उसकी वजह से बांग्लादेश भूटान के स्कॉलर्स हमारे पास आए हैं और हम चाहते हैं आने वाले दिनों में इसको और हम बढ़ाएं। राकेश तिवारी जी, एक फोटो आपके साथ होनी चाहिए। हरून साहब, आप भी। हरून हबीब साहब।
Yes, Harun Habib ji, please. We would like to have you on the dais.